Good morning, everybody. We may all sit. My name is Sobantu Ndlangalavo. I'll be the program director for today. We are here, of course, for the memorial service of our Commissioner, Pravin Gordhan, 1999 to 2009. So this memorial service is dedicated to PG on his life in SARS. I know we are all deeply touched about this, but it's life. We welcome the family. We welcome the guests. Shall I say all protocol observed, in case I miss somebody. But we recognize, of course, the former Minister of Finance, Trevor Manuel. We recognize the former chairperson of SCOPA and later Minister of Finance, Stenjwa, Nene. We recognize the Governor of Reserve Bank, Mr. Lisija. We recognize, I'm even scared to say it, Judge Nugent. We recognize the former DG of Treasury, Maria Ramos. We recognize Mr. Berryho and his wife. If I have forgotten you, I said all protocol observed. I'm just talking from my head. Judge Nugent is sitting with Advocate Steinberg. I'm also scared to call her name. They know why. All protocol observed, we will go to the national anthem. We've got a choir that's going to sing.
Sounds the call to come together, and united we shall stand. Let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa, our land.
Thank you, the choir. Beautiful. Can we all get seated again? We have in the program special guests, former SARS leaders who are going to pay tribute. We've got Office of the Commissioner during that period. People are going to pay a tribute to the former boss. We've got current SARS leaders and employees who are going to pay a tribute. We have the family who also are going to pay tribute, Anisha and Priyesha. Commissioner will indicate if there'll be a further family member to talk. We then have got the keynote address by our Commissioner. Kujo will be the person closing for us. We're hoping to be on time, 10 to 12. You will notice that we started at 10, exactly. Without wasting time, we're going to have silent prayers and meditation for 2 seconds. Thank you. I will then call on the former Minister of Finance, Mr. Trevor Manuel, to come up. I will say a story about him during the course of the presentation, the experience I've had with him in Parliament. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Bantu. Good morning to all of you, but let me single out the closest family. Vani, Anisha, Priyesha, and Viddu. That is the closest family I've ever known. It's a difficult time, but a very important time to be together, reflecting on this amazing life. I want to talk about Pravin, the activist commissioner. One of the great philosophical influences on PG's life was Antonio Gramsci. And if you track the trajectory of PG's life, you will know how important Gramsci came in getting him to understand what was necessary. And I want to just quote a few lines. He says, "You must realize I'm far from being beaten. It seems to me that a man ought to be deeply convinced that the source of his own moral force is in himself. His very energy and will, the iron coherence of ends and means, that he never falls into those vulgar, banal moods, pessimism and optimism." For those who knew PG know about that inner core of strength. That was what defined his activism. I was saying to Judge Dennis Davis earlier this morning, if the assignment was different and not SARS, if the assignment was for PG to be the Commissioner of Police, he would have attacked the task with no less vigor, no less determination, because the objective was never just the job. The objective was how we can deliver a better democracy that impacts on the everyday lives of South Africans. And that was the inner core of activism that defined the Pravin I knew. You see, there were things he knew he wouldn't be good at. He could leave the drafting of the tax law amendments to Kwesi Anthem, and he could leave the human capital arrangements to other people. And his job as head of the organization was to provide vision and to synthesize the various forces into a common whole. And that was the unique strength that Pravin presented. And he was driven by that energy and will and his own moral force. whether it was about joining the dots or whether it was about tackling corruption, whether it was all about doing what was necessary to drive the change. Now, as we all know, when Jill Marcus and I first approached Pravin, he was reluctant. Pravin was the reluctant commissioner. And that was an important starting point because it allowed him to get on with the job, checking out his ego at the door and allowing him to get on with the job. And it allowed him to understand the centrality of transformation for the journey, because the journey was towards a democracy that touches the lives of everyday people. And some of those milestones were firstly the systematic and systemic change in the revenue service. It was the merger of two discrete departments, Inland Revenue and Customs and Excise. It was about ensuring that there were the right people while dealing sensitively with the people who no longer had the skills for the new organization. It was about getting systems in place, because you had to move from a paper-based system to a digitalized revenue service. It was about innovating on some things like pre-inspections for customs and e-filing and the modernization. But there was also, very importantly, how people were convened with the pride of delivery. You know, many of the memorable days in the tax year were those overnighters from the 31st of March to the 1st of April. Pre-announced targets. And one of the pictures in the slideshow is PG and I each having a cricket shirt that says 493 not out, because that was the target. And if you can set the targets and mobilize all of your people, everybody shares in the pride of achievement, and that was a very important feature of the leadership of PG at SARS. And then there was a massive institutional change. I mean, I come here to Kahle SARS and I think, well, it's almost unthinkable of those little offices in Prus Street. There are some old-timers here, you can hear by the laughter, where on the one side, Trevor Manuel and his crew sat, and on the other side, Kahle and his crew. And the institutional change from there to where SARS is today has been no mean feat. It's a very significant driven change that was possible by vision and by mobilizing a whole range of skills from people who otherwise would not have considered a life in the revenue service. And I can run through, and whether you're talking of the Commissioner Ed Kisvete here, or Barry and Brenda Hoare, or I can look for names and I'll see all of you. The light is in my eyes, so forgive me. But people who would not have considered for themselves a career in SARS came along and made the change. And then there were other aspects that became important. You see, one of the hallmarks of this activism was curiosity. This is one issue I'd like to touch on in respect of curiosity. We were looking at some aspects of what was happening. On the south coast of the Western Cape, abalone was being fished out. It wasn't eaten in South Africa, it got out of the country. And how did that happen? And we then needed to establish a team who could help us understand how the abalone got out. And as we understood how the abalone got out, we understood how drugs got in. We understood how counterfeit got in. And we needed to get better at that. Ivan and Van Locherenberg and those people then said, what we need is to deal with this problem. Because it also pointed to other things. It pointed to counterfeit and money laundering. It pointed to all manner of issues. And what PG led an understanding of is we must be able to triangulate information. If we understand what happens to the money, who's bought what car with what resources, who's purchased property with what resources, what are the bank accounts showing? If you have that kind of information, then you can deal with a tax system that is perceived to be fair, and that quality of leadership is something that we need to take very seriously. And was that curiosity that gave rise to special investigations. But as special investigations proceeded, it brought SARS in direct conflict with the criminal networks. And the criminal networks then needed to do other things, including fake intelligence. And so the idea of a rogue intelligence unit was born. But what they described as a rogue intelligence unit was merely SARS extending its work and saying, if we want people to pay tax, there must be a sense of fairness about taxation. And that, in many ways, was the beginning of the onslaught against Pravin. The beginning of the endeavor to dismantle the revenue service. The beginning of the breaking of friendships. I saw a certain man whose name I forget at the funeral in KZN the other day. He said, you know, he was my comrade. He gave me money to get to Swaziland. I don't know what went wrong. I forget his name, but it's not important. Because what this work did was to set up what I can only describe as a clash of civilizations. It was such a strong clash of values. Values between theft and democracy. Value about benefit for some and democracy for all, that created all the difficulty that Pravin, Vani, Anisha, and Priyesha and the extended family lived through. But that was the issue. Fundamentally important, and Pravin didn't ever equivocate on these issues. He set out saying, let's join the dots as we are doing this morning. We can join the dots and see what the issues were. That quote that I read from Gramsci ends with, whatever the situation, I imagine the worst that could happen in order to summon up all my reserves and willpower to overcome every obstacle. To summon up all my reserves and willpower to overcome every obstacle. And that is the story of a life. The life of a commissioner and a minister, but more importantly, the life of an activist whose commitment to democracy didn't ever waver. And so my plea this morning is that in PG's honor, that SARS must be rebuilt to the level it had attained under his leadership, rebuilt with vigor and determination. It's never too late to envision and create the democracy that was dreamed of and felt in those very lonely nights in solitary confinement by Pravin and others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Welcome to our colleagues online. Our colleagues in the regions are also connected here. Welcome to them on this program. Minister Manuel touches on two aspects, activism and targets. So in understanding that we would have to grow the tax base, and those in the 80s, 70s who are advocating for boycotting the system have to be used to get small businesses, especially from previously disadvantaged communities, to be tax compliant. Thus, he announces a small business tax amnesty in February, normally on the budget speech. Because SARS is pumping and busy, this gets forgotten until on the eve of the mid-term budget speech, which happens in October. In August, I get a call. Now, the hallmark of Minister Manuel and Pravin, their phones, you can't recognize them. You can't use through caller. So when it comes, you either know it's PG or it's a minister, between the two. You also had to learn that the business day has been read before 7 a.m. If you have not, you are in trouble. When you arrive here, PG will say, have you seen what's in the paper? The minister will call and say, what? I nearly sweat. Okay, I'm sorry. So you had to learn, have read the business day before 7 a.m. So in August, I get called and say, your new job at 6 a.m. is the head of small business amnesty. We are reporting in October. We won't embarrass the minister. In the midterm. No budget. We put a team together. We do this. Minister Nene is the chairperson of SCOPA. So we report to him. Of SCOPA. So we then going to Parliament to account for the first time on small business amnesty. Linda Enso Business Day is in the room. There was no target set for this, Commissioner, for this, how many we are going to get. Business Day is pushing. How many small business we are going to get, we do not know. It's me and the minister, we meet the committee, I fly back. Following morning, I get a call. Business Day headline, SARS is going to get 350,000 small businesses to apply. I arrive here, I get a call from the commissioner. Who the flowers said this is the number? I said, I didn't speak to no one. I said, I didn't speak to no one. Who could have then done the interview? I don't know. We were meeting the minister that day. So we arrived, the minister said, hey, it's me who told Inda. So Bantu, you are going to take it as a man. We are going to get Mr. Nene as the next speaker. Mr. Nene, please.
Thank you, Sobantu, for that introduction. But who always wants to be referred to or associated with his ex-life? I didn't say your ex, I said your ex-life. Now, the governor there was saying, I must correct Sobantu when he says I was chairperson of SCOPA. I said, no, that's a very powerful committee. I would want to be associated with it. Gordhan's family, you know, Vani and the daughters and the rest of the family, and all esteemed guests in the house. The difficulty I had when asked to say a few words about Pravin was how on earth, I've seen how you tried to put together his life in a few pages, and now trying to put that in a speech becomes even more difficult. But again, I was comforted by the fact that the Commissioner said, I must just share some insights during that time of my ex-life as the finance, as part of the Finance Committee. Now, every time I listen to people who knew Comrade PG, I can't stop relating to my own relationship and encounter with him. So many attributes and values have been mentioned to try and describe the man that he was. When I refer to people that knew him, I'm referring to those that really knew him, not those that claim to know him, but really don't. In trying to put this together, I only managed to put together the intro. And after that, my mind just wandered all over, and I was like, how do I say this? Ladies and gentlemen, even though I had known and respected him way back in the 80s, I had not had personal contact with him until Parliament back in 1999. His contribution to the birth of our democracy was well publicized, and a number of speakers have given an account of how he executed this responsibility with skill, dedication, and commitment, whilst ensuring that the outcomes of a free and prosperous South Africa are achieved. I vividly remember how he coined the famous sufficient consensus as a basis for proceeding to the next level of negotiations. I joined the National Assembly as a Member of Parliament in the Second Democratic Parliament in 1999, and that is where I would have the close encounter with PG as the Commissioner of SARS in my role as a member of the Portfolio Committee on Finance. It was in this space that I felt that the finances of our country were in safe hands with Comrade PG at SARS, Comrade Trevor as Minister of Finance, and Governor Tito Mboweni at the Reserve Bank. They made a formidable team. Preparing for the appearance of these teams before the committee was torture and excruciating. I was telling the Commissioner this morning, because you would know that their presentation would contain so much information that would require you to understand the role these entities played in promoting and supporting the country's democratic agenda. But the difficult part would be, as you read the documents in preparation and questions arise in your mind, you get to the next page, you get your answers before you actually ask them. You move on and you're like, no, man, I need to find something. And by the time you get to the committee, you are just, you just don't know what to do. And then he also now introduced something which became in the tradition now with these institutions. I don't know whether they planned this, SAB, and the minister himself, Minister Manuel, where they would actually engage with us the night before the meeting. So now you go to the meeting, you've already dealt with issues. How on earth do you raise these things again? Because they have already been dealt with. So again, but that was now somebody who wants to subject himself to accountability openly without, I mean, some people would actually do the opposite of trying to make it difficult for you to hold them accountable. But here is somebody who actually facilitates a process that would make him accountable. So this is the activists that we talk about would always come out whenever you engaged and whenever you actually worked with PG. I remember vividly again also when he took the committee, when we walked the streets in Belleville, you were the commissioner, to actually, as Trevor was saying, to actually get to the bottom of this thing, where we would actually walk into the shop, stock right up to roof level, and there is no compliance whatsoever. And then when you ask these people where the boss is, they will give you the number of a person to phone, and you call this guy. We walked, I think, about 4 or 5 of them. All of them, there was only one boss, and the boss was not there. He was in Joburg. So all of those things, so they came to the fore, and it is informed by this information and by this level of digging into detail that would actually produce the efficient and the effective SARS that we have today. Ladies and gentlemen, I can go on and on. But again, one of the things that one learned in Pravin's leadership, it was the leadership that actually stood firm, even in the midst of whatever that would shake it, where you would actually sit and he would say, this is the way we are going. So even after Parliament, I had also the privilege of working with him for 5 years as Deputy Minister of Finance. Again, it was the same Pravin who actually made sure. I don't think he had enough sleep. I don't think he had enough sleep, because when do you cook all of these ideas? And he was, meticulous in the manner that he approached things, which meant he had given it time in his mind. And when do you do that other than when everybody is asleep and it is quiet in the room? To be able to come up with, and when he put it together, he would find a situation, and he had this thing of wanting to always put a graphical representation of whatever that. He draw the lines as you connect the dots, but before you even connect the dots, he already has a schematic, diagram of what it is. Then it moves from here, and this is what it comes down to. And why would you not understand what the man is teaching you? Because, he was a teacher, he was an activist, he was virtually everything, such that when you listen to his attributes, you ask yourself, as we bid him farewell, whether we haven't buried too many people in one grave. Too many people have been buried in one grave in Pravin. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, because as I said, I managed to put together a speech, and I also find it difficult following after the eloquent Trevor to put together a formidable. But again, if you look back, I think, sad as it is that Pravin has departed, I think we find joy and comfort in that we've had the privilege to share this life with him. We've had the privilege to learn so much from him that it is now time to try and practice, because you wouldn't have been able to practice it whilst he was alive. This is the time for us to try and actually emulate PG. This is now the time to try and make sure that the fights he fought against corruption, the fights he fought against all sorts of malfeasance are now ours to take forward. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Thank you, Minister. Without wasting time, we'll call former DG at Treasury, Ms. Maria Ramos. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, both in the room and on video. And thank you very much for joining us. I want to start by addressing Vani, Anisha, and Priyesha. As much as we are all here as colleagues of Pravin, and as we have celebrated his life and mourned his passing as South Africans, first and foremost, Pravin, PG, celebrated, loved, cared, and his heart was filled with his love for the three of you. Vani, for you as his wife and his partner, Anisha and Priyesha, for his pride, his joy. There was nothing else that he celebrated more, that filled his heart more than that, for his extended family. So we all miss him. We will always miss him. We will always live with the lessons that he's taught us and he's left us. But the thing that drove him was that love that kept him going through the toughest times. So to the three of you, to your extended family, my condolences, my love. I know that loss will live for a long time, but you will always celebrate the times that you had together. Even as the pain will continue, it will sustain you for the rest of your lives. It has really been extraordinarily hard to put these words together. Pravin Gordhan, or PG, was in every sense of the word an outstanding South African. He epitomized all that we aspire to be, and the outpouring of grief, respect, remembrance, and celebration of his life, and his momentous contribution to our country attests to this. My role today is pretty limited. It is limited to painting a small part in the rich canvas that was Pravin Gordhan's life, namely the time we shared as colleagues when he took over as Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services, and of course, I cannot be and will never be as eloquent as his former minister, Trevor Manuel. But Pravin took over on the 8th of November of 1999. I know that because I went back and I read all the annual reports of the South African Revenue Service, as some of you who still remember and worked with me know, I can be pretty meticulous about checking the facts. And Pravin signed the annual report of 2000, and in brackets, as meticulous as he was one of the things we shared. He said, took over on the 8th of November, 1999. SARS had been granted administrative autonomy in October of 1997 when the South African Revenue Service Act of 34 of 1997 was promulgated on the 5th of September of 1997. Prior to that, what existed were two directorates within the Department of Finance, the Directorate of Inland Revenue and Customs and Excise, something I found quite interesting when I first joined government as the Deputy Director of the Department of Finance. It was a period of intense and exciting change, not only for the revenue services, but for our country. For the National Treasury, or it's still the Department of Finance in those days, and the newly established SARS, the pace of change embodied the hopes, the needs, the expectations of our country, which were huge. The challenges we inherited from the apartheid state were daunting, but failure was not an option. What drove all of us then was the unwavering commitment to a better life for all our people. We were bound by a mutual commitment, a set of values, a deep and unshakable respect for a constitution we had toiled for and for whom so many had lost their lives to achieve. A leadership with courage and conviction. The scale of the post-apartheid reconstruction has not been appropriately appreciated. It touched all facets of our society and our economy. Pravin Gordhan was a part of this courageous leadership, and that he joined SARS to lead it into that first phase of its build-up and construction was a huge privilege, and I think a masterstroke. The transformation and building of the South African Revenue Services was huge and was a challenging, albeit exciting job. Pravin understood from the very beginning that SARS's transformation was complex and multidimensional. As you heard earlier from Trevor, organizationally it required a radical overhaul of technology and systems, a fundamental change in organizational structure, a culture of human resources and policies, of processes, including the autonomy to recruit and retain skills and skilled professionals. The internal challenges were huge. It is hard to comprehend today the scale of the challenge and the change that was required. Technology, where it existed in the newly established SARS, and may I say the Department of Finance as it was then, itself undergoing a huge transformation to become the National Treasury, was archaic or at best rudimentary. Systems, data, information, and the basic requirements for good, informed policy making were simply not of a standard required for transformation. Sometimes they were non-existent. Fiscal policy, good fiscal policy, requires good information, as well as skilled and dedicated and committed professionals. Indeed, the magnitude of reform needed was so big that for the first few years, our focus was in improving tax administration, on building systems, on building the institutions. That was the central pillar of tax policy. The complexity of the challenge facing Commissioner Gordhan was not limited to changing the internal culture of SARS. A much bigger, more existential challenge was changing the culture and the attitude of South Africans towards taxation. Pravin set about this task with all the skill, commitment, discipline, passion, and zeal that came with his long history of struggle and activism. Those of you who saw the pictures and the videos early saw examples and can attest to this. Former Minister Trevor Manuel, Deputy Minister Jill Marcus, later Deputy Minister and then Minister Nene, and even Deputy Minister Mandisi Mpatlwa set about indoctrinating, cajoling, convincing, teaching South Africans the virtues of being a good tax citizen, making the connection between taxes and the public services. Being in good standing with the South African Revenue Service became the mantra. It stopped being an optional extra. I learned very early in my tenure that fiscal reforms were complex. Tax reform, whether as an administrative or of a policy nature, was particularly difficult. Pravin and I spent a lot of time thinking through the options, the impact, the opportunities, and the unintended consequences of the choices that presented themselves with colleagues in the Treasury and the Revenue Services. Pravin's focus was always on the strategic perspectives, on the bigger picture, on how choices and decisions affected the lives and the livelihoods of the people of our country. He spent a lot of time walking the floors, the offices of SARS, walking our country, meeting people. You heard earlier from Ntlanta and from Trevor, and you've seen the videos, as I said, and the pictures of the many, many hours, days, months that Pravin spent meeting people, touching people, understanding really what the impact was of the decisions we were taking. He didn't talk about it, he didn't theorize about it. He really understood and touched people's lives. One of the most neglected aspects of fiscal policy is the need for a well-functioned and well-resourced institutions. The effort was on building institutions capable of delivering on the legitimate aspirations, needs, and mandates of our new democracy. And it required somebody like Pravin who could make that engagement, make that connection, build those bridges, and understand what it means to build institutions. Institutions aren't about technology. They're about people. They're about that connection. They're about building that understanding. When I look back at that period, I feel deeply privileged to have worked and learned from Pravin. It was a period of immense and intense change, of building, of driving reforms, of making big decisions. We were driven by a common vision and a set of values. We wanted to fulfill the promise of our new constitution and our democracy. We were committed to building an equitable, caring society and a growing and sustainable economy capable of creating decent jobs and delivering on the basic needs of all South Africans. There was an important thread underlying everything that happened throughout this period, and that is the unrelenting hard work, discipline, attention to detail, pushing the boundaries on excellence and focusing on delivery. The very essence of what public service means, caring for what you do, how you do it, who it touches, and what the outcome of that is. Not just ahead of that budget deadlines, but absolutely every single day. Pravin set an exceedingly high set of standards for himself and for the SARS team. Pravin's ethics, values, hard work, integrity, passion, and intellect shaped and built the institution that SARS is today. It created the foundations and the resilience that sustained the organization through some of its most difficult and troubled times. It shaped the culture of excellence and service and professionalism that continues to define this great organization. Today, and over the past few days, we've celebrated and continue to celebrate and recognize Pravin's indelible and exemplary contribution to the shaping of our democracy, the values that must anchor it, and the institutions that define it and ensure its longevity and resistance. SARS was a happy place for PG. Like all of us here today, I have lost a cherished friend and a mentor, and a deeply respected colleague. I will forever feel a deep sense of privilege to have known Pravin. Maya Angelou wrote in a very beautiful book called A Letter to My Daughter, and I quote, "Be certain that you do not die without having done something wonderful for humanity." Pravin lived his life in service of South Africa and our democracy, and he has left us with a legacy we must continue to build on in the service of our common humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, DG Ramos. We're going to call on the governor of Reserve Bank, Sir. He once blamed us, Commissioner, for budget surplus. And he was saying, how do we now allocate if you guys are over-collecting?
Of course, I will never say such things. Good morning, colleagues, and all protocols observed, but Vani and the family, thank you very much for sharing PG with us. So, I called PG uncle whenever I called him. And when he calls or he returns the call, he will say, "Brew." So, and in a way, he didn't realize we called him uncle because when he gave us troubles, we spoke to Auntie Vani. And so we would make the trips to Waterkloof to come and speak to Auntie Vani to help soften things for us. And I will come back to that at some stage. What you had, program director, here is a pecking order. I got told I have got 3 minutes, and I understood why. Because, you see, there was the first minister, then there was another minister, and of course the minister who was supposed to speak after Trevor was Pravin, but he's not here. So they had Nene. I don't want to say what happened afterwards. But what you didn't say is that, quite frankly, governors have got nothing to talk about commissioners of SARS. So you should have just said that we have asked the former DG of the Treasury to speak, because I came to speak after my predecessor. And so I thought that I would restrict myself, confine myself to 2 things. Firstly, a lot had been said, or some of the things that had been said about institutions. And so I was saying to Thoraya sitting behind me, there goes my speech, because one of the things we had learned was that if you represent an organization, you allow the organization to speak through you. And so, what was the Reserve Bank going to speak through me about the former commissioner of SARS? They had nothing, so they kept on asking me, can we see what you are going to say? So I said, I have got nothing. I'm only going to talk about 2 things. I'm going to talk about institutions, and I am going to talk about leadership of those institutions. As it just so happened, you think you have people who are saving you, but they continue to be spokespersons of other people. So she took my notes and inserted them into Maria's speech. Institutions of our democracy matter. quality institutions matter even more. PG built in SARS a quality institution, a formidable institution that stood head above shoulders against its peers around the world. This didn't go unrecognized. For between 2006 and 2009, he served as the president of the World Customs Organization. Your peers do not ask you to lead them unless you know what you are doing. Importantly, it is domestic success that leads to international recognition. It's not because you are recognized internationally that we give you responsibility at home. And what PG did in building this formidable institution was to build a particular level of respect for South African institutions. If you want to destroy a democracy, that's the point of departure. Go for its institutions. Undermine those institutions. Attack those institutions. And I am speaking because central banking is a punching bag. In South Africa, there are some 62 million of us, and everybody knows exactly what the central bank must do. I have got no doubt when it comes to SARS, the 62 million people do not know what SARS must do. What they probably would be telling us is what SARS should not be doing. And it is no wonder that when our democracy was under attack, the one institution that got a particular ugly focus was the South African Revenue Service. But you see, if you are going to destroy an institution that PG leads, you need to really build resilience. And not only should you build resilience, you have got to have a particular single-mindedness about that. Because, as he would say, I will take you at every round until the higher purpose is delivered. And so when he came to the Treasury, I had heard this thing because Momo called me and asked me whether I remember the password for the handover file in 2009. And I said, I am not sure of the password. It's a long time since I left. But I think it is PATTI or PATTY. Because there is one gentleman who has got a very selective memory, and one of the things that he kept on forgetting was the password. So we had to give a password that he could easily remember. Lo and behold, the password was correct. But I was carrying that file in the boot of my car all the time. And then on some fateful day, on Mother's Day, I got a call from a private number. And I was in church, and I went outside, and I said hello, and I never leave church to go and answer the phone. And the message was, I'm gone. And then I said, so who am I getting? Someone you will be happy with. So I left. So I sent PG a message. And I said that, PG, I'm attending Mother's Day lunch not too far from your house. After Mother's Day lunch, I would like to come and see you. And he replies and he says, I thought this thing is still a secret. Message given, so I knew who the Minister of Finance was. And the reason that was to be was because in 2008, I was in the office, and Trevor Manuel says, do you want to walk 9 holes with me? Of course, I don't carry my golf clubs to the office, so I had to figure out how to do these things, and we had to go and play a round of golf. And then he said, two important things. One, the time I have been the Minister of Finance is longer than the time I will be the Minister of Finance. Two, you are a Mandarin, and I want you to understand that the political situation has become complex. And you must be aware of politics as a Mandarin, but never play the politics. Be aware of the politics, because you'll have to navigate them, because the decisions that you want are taken by the politicians. But as a Mandarin, do not play the politics. It's an advice that I carried from that day. I carry it till today. And when there were some rumors and I said, no, I don't want to play politics. My job is to navigate the politics. So please leave me where I am, because I do not want to play the politics. Of course, if you can succeed in destroying institutions, there is the one thing that you can do. You populate the institution with pliable individuals, with no character, with no ethics, with no sense of purpose. For if you are a public servant, the first thing that drives you, and people say, is saving our people, how do you serve the people you don't love? The point of departure should be the love of our people. And if you love our people, you will go out and serve them. And today I can stand here without any fear of contradiction to say Pravin loved his people. And that is why he could serve them with so much dedication, with so much commitment, and constantly be asking, as you are dedicating yourself to the service of the people, what is the higher purpose that we are trying to serve? So in 2008, we have this series of dinners between the SARS team and the Treasury team, which we excluded the politicians from. It was just us. And what we were discussing every week was to try and prepare for the worst finance minister that we would ever have, and how we would be able to navigate such a thing. So we worked out all the scenarios. They turned out to be useless, at least for 5 years, because it turned out the Minister of Finance was working with us to prepare for the worst finance minister that we would have. I don't know which one was worst, but a bad one did arrive at some stage. I am not getting there. The journey was not a smooth one. And so one of the budget speeches that we had to craft, and we would craft these speeches, and then at the end we will go through iterations, and we would then just say, black man, you are on your own, and he must go and deliver the speech. And after years of successfully outperforming revenue targets, in that year of 493, the target was missed, not on the upside, but on the downside. So now it was a communication nightmare. What does this tell us, and so forth? And so we have to tell things the way they are. The figure is that figure. It's 493. That is not what we expected. And so what did we do? We had to go back, by the way, because the budget speech had decided not to quote Gramsci, but to quote Schumpeter. And Schumpeter had said that the history of every nation will be written in its fiscal indicators. The history of every nation will be written with its fiscal indicators. Get it now. You destroy the institution that is at the center of fiscal management. You destroy the numbers. You are trying to rewrite history, or you are trying to make us have this thing disappear. So be it. We get there to the press conference, and the first question was, Commissioner, you had missed the revenue target. And then so he explains these things, and then Trevor Manuel says, let me help the Commissioner. That is not the story, Commissioner. The story is, today it is the 1st of April, and on the 31st of March, the fiscal year closed, and here is a country on the southern tip of Africa, it could announce and say, this was the revenue of the previous year, within a very reasonable level of accuracy. And it is a feat that South Africans take for granted. There are very few countries that would announce revenue figures a day after you have closed the financial year. And once again, it is testimony to the kind of institution that Pravin had built. And so as he came to the Treasury and he worked there at the Treasury, we could see that after the departure of Oupa Magashula, things were no longer swinging in the direction that we had. I will leave that to the Commissioner of SARS to say where he found them when he eventually came back. Let me close on a personal note. I talked about Mother's Day 2009, and I had abused this because I arrived there, and then something to drink, and I said, herbal tea. It turned out that every time I would go to the Gordhan's house, even if I would have preferred a glass of wine, Vani just brought me a herbal tea because that is what I did every time I had been there. Things were not just so plain sailing. So, budget 2010, as it had always happened, an inflation target is announced by the Minister of Finance to say that the Reserve Bank and us, we had agreed on this. Pravin, the activist, says that there is something missing in this letter. Says, Pravin, there is nothing in this letter. Says, there is something missing in this letter. There are things that we are not taking. Tell us the things and then we will put them. And he says, there's something missing in the letter. So eventually the letter got crafted and is a public letter and is entitled Clarification of the Mandate of the South African Reserve Bank. And I says, Pravin, there is nothing to clarify. We can just quote the Constitution. There is nothing to clarify, and let me tell you, if there is a lack of clarity on the interpretation of the law, there is only one institution that can settle that is a court of law. So let's not get there. But I understood his political mastery because he convinced his colleagues that he has fundamentally changed the mandate of the Reserve Bank. And all that he did was to reconfirm the mandate of the Reserve Bank and then said, please also take account of fluctuations in employment and output and be cognizant of that as you pursue the inflation target. Mission accomplished, the mandate of the Reserve Bank is still the same. That was his political mastery. Talk the language that the audience talks in order to serve the higher purpose that you were actually serving. And lastly was that in that very year, in 2010, after the budget policy statement, and I had seen this before, because I was in a roadshow with Maria and Trevor, and then we were going through the thing, and then one day Trevor is very upset. He has got flu, and he says, no, but if you have got flu, why are you upset? Just go and sleep. And then Maria said, Lesecha, I'm going, you deal with Trevor. And then I have to sit there and say, how is your flu? He said, forget the flu. Gear is under attack. That is what is at stake. Our macroeconomic framework is at stake back home. So he was upset. So Pravin walks in after we take stock after the budget policy statement, he walks into the room, and then he says, yeah, what do you think of the budget policy statement? He said, we thought that it was very good. He stands up, he storms up, and he said to us, I have heard that you guys are arrogant. I never thought I would experience this myself. And he walked out, and then after he walked out, then we are left there, and then I say, damn it, what are we going to do? We have a discussion. And then after we had had a discussion, he had left, and then Dondo comes to me afterwards and said, Pravin says he wants to see you. And I said, okay. Now this is now in the evening. I go, I see him, and he says that, listen here, there's something you must manage. I understand the team is very unhappy. The last thing I want is that team to walk out and the institution, just manage it. And then, of course, I have to manage it. So I had left. So we then meet as the team. After we met as the team, we took a decision. Because after that, he had to go to Durban now. There were all sorts of things in 2010. What do? We said, no, we have got to send a delegation to deal with this. So what must the delegation do? No, the delegation must go and speak to Pravin to say what he has done is untoward. He can't behave like this. And then after a long discussion, says, no, it's not going to work. Do you know what you must do? Try and make sure that when you speak to him, Auntie Vani is in the room. So once again, we abused Auntie Vani, and we managed to get the situation. And then, of course, I'm leaving. He said to me, I want 5 years from you. I said, PG, you're not getting 5 years from me as the DG of the Treasury. Kahle, I am done. And then he said to me, okay. I said, I'm not just going to walk away. I will stick around until you have appointed a DG. Give me 2 years. And he said, so what do you want to do? I told him what I think I would like to do. And I said, what I think I want to do, I don't think that they will give me. And he reached an agreement. He says, okay, just say it and then leave it with me. Nothing written. Suffice to say, Pravin is a man of his word. And today I am here speaking to you as the Governor of the Reserve Bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. I want to concede, indeed, you were here as the former DG of Treasury. Mistake taken. We'll call on the founding member of EXCO at SARS and the former head of customs, Mr. Vuso Shabalala. Shengu.
I'll try and speak as long as possible to make up for the fact that I'm so short. To the family of Pravin Gordhan, I knew him first as Comrade Pravin. He was my driver in Durban. Actually, not quite my driver. He used to pick me in some corner to meetings because he was the most trusted by whoever wanted to meet me. He was at the time being sought after by the police because of the state of emergency in 1986. I was in the country illegally, so he was taking big chances. And I learned that this is a very brave man. and this is a very committed man. In 1999, I came to SARS to work with, or under Ivan Pillay. Ivan wanted to set up an integrity unit, and it was to be led by Jean Ravele, and would have Mohammed Latif with him. I mention this because it marks the fact that shortly after being in SARS, Mr. Gordhan and Pillay thought that they must prioritize the issue of integrity in the organization. SARS being a tax administration and having customs reporting as part of it, it was important that the level of integrity be maintained as high as possible. But Mr. Gordhan then quickly shifted me and said, we need to get a closer look at the customs area, which at the time had lost its leaders, and he needed to rebuild it. Now, he knew very well that I was not a customs man. I knew nothing about customs. So he built support around me. And he got a Zimbabwean who had worked at the World Customs Organization for some 7 or 8 years, at the recommendation of the Deputy Secretary General of the World Customs Organization, Losbenko, a Russian. And then we had DFID agent who was resident here, also a very experienced customs officer, having worked as a customs officer and then worked in the Commissioner's office of Her Majesty's Customs and Excise. It was easy for me to get going on the SARS, on the customs side, because there was already a team of people, a team of officers that had been set up as the Customs Transformation Program by the Deputy Minister of Finance, Jill Marcus. However, I mustn't make it sound like it was so easy a thing. We had a minister who made sure that he would meet us every fortnight. And we would go through the agenda items, and then he would look at me and say, "Hey, Vuso, I'm an agnostic on this customs thing. I don't think that there is customs in this country." So I thought, no, he was jacking me up and making sure that I do my work. In fact, on the one time, he took me to go and see some customs offices. I think we started in Beitbridge and we went all the way to Kolela. The big thing about customs at the time was that it had been battered a bit. There were not enough officers in the various, in the 32 offices that we're dealing with. Customs had a big AG problem about examination rates and the round-tripping and that the minister has talked about. The Commissioner gave me a lot of support. Also, when he had drawn me to the executive committee, he was really, at the time, almost the only person who seemed to be very interested and questioning me about what is going on in customs. I learned to think a little bit like him, because he would say things that would help me think out what I was to do in customs. One of the things that he liked to talk about in the beginning was, what are the vital signs of SARS? What must we look at first to determine the health of this organization? Now, I had that problem because here I am at the head office. I've never worked in the organization itself, in the offices. It's scattered all over, and all the people who are at head office have their own jobs. Nobody has a job of looking after the whole of customs. I had to be the kind of activist that he was. We developed our own measures by which we measured the performance of the organization. I've said that there was a CTP, a Customs Transformation Program. So when we started SIACA, Customs was more or less in a good position because it already had a team that was doing nothing else but looking at customs transformation. We then, through the customs transformation itself, got this team that was now looking at leading the whole organization, the Division of Customs, in the transformation program, but then also making it easier to get the organization in the whole country moving in one direction. The other thing that I learned from, and this is the last one before I sit down. He used to ask, what are the pain points of the taxpayers when dealing with us? What are the things that they are hassled by? that makes them angry rather than happy to come to the offices and sort out their business. A client service charter was developed in that process, and we're to adapt it also for customs. But the point about it is not so much that we did that, but it was the questions that he would ask that would trigger how we then go on to do the work. There was a strong performance management system and a strong operations management system, which again would take some of it from the kind of inland revenue side and apply it also in the customs side. Even though I was new, the officers in the customs side all welcomed the change, and they taught me customs so that pretty soon I could speak as if I knew what I was talking about. I got them closer. Intikab and Bear Strawn became my closest advisors. And if I did anything that seemed to be like clever, it was because they were wise. After leaving SARS, I would often remember what I learned from Pravin when I was at SARS, even when I was at the Department of Justice, where the culture was completely the opposite. So, to the family again and to everybody, having observed all the protocols, this is all that I can say.
Good morning, everyone. I know you know this song, so you're welcome to join us. Thank you. Modimo haliteng hayo matata hayo matata hayo modimo haliteng hayo matata hayo matata hayo modimo haliteng matata hayo matata hayo
you so much. Thank you, guys. Thank you. These are our staff members. We didn't go get them outside. They work for SARS. Thank you. We're going to run with the program, and thank you for being patient with us. The segment now is former SARS leaders who are going to be paying tribute to the Commissioner. We're going to ask them to be really short. We've got Dr. Randall Carolson, Mukhtar Mohammed, Habiba, JVL, and Mr. Les Phillips. They will come in that order. Dr. Randall, please.
Thank you, Subanto. Academics are not known to be short in their speeches. Honored guests, colleagues, the Gordhan family, thank you for giving us this remarkable man and formidable leader that we were privileged to share so many good times with and that we had so many learnings from. I'm privileged to be talking on behalf of SARS personnel and ex-SARS personnel. Since the announcement of his passing, many of us have exchanged anecdotes about the life lessons and personal encounters we had with PG, and ultimately reflect on the life of his life and the respect we had for this remarkable man. There's a truism that says that a good leader takes people to beyond what they thought we were capable of. This held indeed true for PG. His rallying call, "We are working for a higher purpose," constantly spurred us to achieve what then seemed to be impossible. The phenomenal success of SARS in the 2000s brought SARS the fiscal space to weather the 2008 financial crisis. And he constantly impressed on us that we have to make sure that South Africa remained fiscally sovereign. Also, the resilience of the post-2008 crisis saw South Africa recovering much faster than the rest of the world, and even many of the developed countries. We remember his tough leadership, his uncompromising standards, and his constant quest for excellence. I think at that stage, unbeknownst to us, he was actually preparing us for those times that we will be tested, and we are thankful for him for that. Most of us can testify to his meticulousness in planning and executing campaigns. No detail was too small and sloppiness not tolerated. He could see further than all of us and modify his strategy when required. He was a warrior and loved a good scrap. You took him on your own peril. This was a rueful discovery that I made, a rueful discovery for myself, when I tried to explain to him that you cannot have a point target for a revenue target as large as we were chasing, and that we should be looking at ranges. He looked at me and he said to me, "The time that you spent arguing with me about statistics which you learned in school, you could have collected R1 billion already." As much as he was a fearless warrior, he expected the same from all of us. Woe betide you when he detected you give less than what you are capable of. His wrath was not wished on your worst enemy. But nobody would cover your back better than him when he knows that you are committed to the higher purpose. But then again, you would never know when you do well, because he would never say well done. But he will find a way through others to let you know that he has recognized your achievement. He tried his best not to reveal his soft side, but sometimes he might not get it right. I remember his impishness, exactly like it is on that photograph there, when he had you cornered on the ropes, when you thought that you could take him on. We all have stories about how he reached out to us when personal tragedy struck. Then he was like a compassionate and caring father and a guiding force. It would just not be possible for us not to recognize how profoundly he shaped our leadership philosophies and many of the others. Although he drove us to distraction with his exacting performance levels, he was always fair and acted with the utmost integrity. That's why SARS people can hold their heads high wherever they go in the world. The respect we enjoy at global institutions is certainly because we were basking in his afterglow. Our only hope is that his passing would mark a new era of integrity and a societal rejection of corruption. We owe this to his legacy, that of a just and fair society where all South Africans can live dignified lives free from corruption. Our sincere condolences to the Gordhan family.
I'll keep it short. Good morning to the Gordhan family and to all that are gathered here to remember and reminisce the life of Pravin Gordhan, former minister in the South African cabinet and former commissioner of SARS. I had the privilege of working with Pravin Bhai and had a number of opportunities to engage with him in different settings and situations. My first indirect engagement was in 1971, when I was a freshman on Salisbury Island, the then Indian University. A friend of mine told me, "You see that guy there? He's not scared of anybody. He says it the way he thinks it." That was my baptism to be conscientized into social justice and on the evils of apartheid. Forward wind, and not 30 years, I ended up working at SARS. These are some of the things I'd like to share with you. No amount of preparation was sufficient when you had a one-on-one session with Pravin or when you were preparing for an EXCO meeting. Doesn't matter how well you knew your subject, he left you wanting. And this forced you to just prepare harder and better. His uncompromising stance on striving for the best, for the less privileged, and for the greater good of South Africa resulted in him always driving you to make sure that you and your team worked more effectively and efficiently. He led by example. His energy and drive rubbed onto you. When we prepared for parliamentary sessions, or for meetings with the minister, or with internal and external entities, he insisted that you prepare 120%. This set the highest standards and ensured that you could navigate through the items with confidence and conviction. He always listened to the issues raised by employees and insisted that you dealt with them fairly, but still stay within the bounds of the rules and legislation. His compassion for all was boundless, more so for the less privileged. At every turn, he reminded us to be constantly vigilant of the potential for corruption. He was unapologetic to take on anybody head-on who breached this. This gave you courage knowing that you had his back. His attention to detail was legendary. No comma or full stop was left unchecked. The biggest thrill was when you made a submission or a position paper and he did not have the red mark on it. I can count on my fingertips the number of times that happened. The bits that I've shared with you helped to shape my persona and thinking. I became tuned into the issue of the high purpose. I know with conviction that most people who had the privilege of being in his presence would share similar stories. He created an environment where you only wanted to give your best and constantly strive for truth and justice. It is only this desire to seek the truth and justice that enables you to remain steadfast in your resolve to make it better for all South Africans. Shukran by Pravin Bhai for having allowed me into your life and on your journey, and to have conscientized me to see the world and life through a more caring and giving lens. You dedicated your life to creating a better future for all the people of our beloved country. You will be sorely missed. I salute you, sir. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody, to the Gordhan family. My absolute condolences and also my thanks to you for sharing your husband and your dad with us. I saw a little clip of you last week where you said your dad gave you $250 to pay for photocopy when you were in the office. Absolutely amazing, and that is actually the person that we got to know, absolutely ethical, and didn't shy away one bit from telling us when we were going wrong. So I've heard so much here, and to everybody that is here today as we reminisce, there's some special moments that I have of Mr. Gordhan. I think I had the luxury of being chastised at the His People Church in front of 1,500 people, but you quickly had to pull your socks up and put that smile on and go out there and go and fight again. When we started Siaka, it was a difficult time for many, but I think what set us apart is that we were given as leaders, we were given the tools to go and help the regions understand what was happening. And Tinus, if you were here, and Vili, many of us were parked into cars, and we would have to get up early and we would have to go to the various offices, whether it was in Beaufort or in George, and we would have to go and sit and engage with our staff members. Your dad wanted that personal touch, so he knew what it meant to mobilize people to understand why the higher purpose is important. And so in touching everybody, I also want to share with Mukhtar what he said about your dad being one step ahead. One step ahead because Commissioner Gordhan would phone us in the offices in the branch level and say, Habiba, what's going on there in the mail center? So by the time he speaks to Tinus, he's already got 2 or 3 views on what was happening. I remember so many I have many fond memories, but rest assured, we got our hiding on time, Giorgio. If the queues outside the branch office was too long, we would be called. Why are the queues long? You needed to do something. You had to be creative. You had to be bold. But there's one thing that marks his legacy, in my eyes at least. I could be fearless. I could be bold. I could be whatever I wanted to do because I knew I had a leader who had my back. And that to me is the one thing that resonates with so many people in this room here. That if he believed in us, he pushed us, we were those foot soldiers, we had to go and we had to make things work. But the fact of the matter is, if there was never a moment's doubt that when the chips were down, he had our back. So a colleague of mine, ex-colleague of mine is not here today, but I think it was about 2 months ago, she called me up and she said, you know, Habiba, my life was in danger. And PG had already left SARS and he was minister. He didn't contact me, but he told another person to phone and tell me my life is in danger. And everybody, this is exactly the PG that we know and loved. Somebody that didn't have to be in your ambit, but would still continue to look out for you. So thank you to you for sharing your husband and your dad with us, and to the SARS colleagues that worked with PG. I think one thing we can all admit is he made us so much stronger. Many a times I would leave with tears, but I would go and cry outside, and then I would waltz right back up again and be there. And when this minister, ex-minister Manuel, I remember PG brought you to the office and you were languishing on all the tax returns that came in. That was another thing that he did with us. He always exposed us to the ministers. He had that collaboration. We could come in, we were able to give a view. And on that note, He will be absolutely missed. Just before I left, he sent me a little video clip. His phone was buzzing significantly, and I think he was extremely busy. But he took the time, he had the time to send a little video clip wishing me well in the future. And this is the person that PG is. My no-nonsense attitude stems so much from being in his presence and his company. And as I said, he made us fearless. So to the SARS leaders, we still have a long path to walk. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm a bit emotional. The Gordhan family, ladies and gentlemen, throughout his life, Mr. Gordhan faced and took on immense challenges, yet his commitment to the people of this country never faltered. He touched the lives of friends and adversaries alike, as is evident in the profound reactions that occurred and still occurs in his passing. In contrast to those who benefited from his work, yet undermined it through past and continued active or indirect conspiracy, pretense, silence, and inaction, his legacy stands as a testament to the values he championed. He profoundly changed my life and those of others forever. As we remember him today, let us not only mourn the loss of an extraordinary individual, but also celebrate the values that he embodied, values that will continue to inspire us as we strive for a better tomorrow. Rest in peace, PG. You'll never be forgotten.
To the Gordhan family, our deepest condolences. Greetings to all. Life is filled with challenges, and we have to navigate our way through this. In the process, we need to make decisions. This is true of all of us. Certainly it was true for Pravin Gordhan. He had to make choices, and choices he made. At the end of life's journey, we come to appreciate the impact of these choices. If I could sum up the life of Pravin Gordhan, what comes to mind is this: I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. He fought a good fight, and a fight it was. He did not choose the path of least resistance. He fought not for self-gain, but it was a good fight, a fight for justice and equality for all. He fought selflessly, consistently, fearlessly. In everything he did, he pursued excellence. He would send back work to be redone if he did not meet the high standards that he set for himself and others around him. I can personally attest to that. Indeed, he fought a good fight. There's a history of people that started well, but was distracted by the trappings of comfort and easy gain. You see, we are good at launching a project, and we are good to celebrate when we achieve success. But the real challenge is in what someone has called the in-between, between the start and the finish. When the criticisms come, when the doubting Thomases makes their appearance, when energy levels are low and the tasks seem impossible. Pravin Gordhan is an example of pushing on and pushing through, an example of determination and grit. In the in-between is when one's character comes to the fore,
to push through even against popular opinion. Yes, there's a litany of people that have started and was found wanting in the in-between. Not so with Pravin Gordhan. He started the race. He finished the race. What he set out to do, that he completed. It is not only the fighting or the fighting a good fight. It's not only finishing the race. It is also about how we fight and how we run. He did this with humility. He did this with integrity. He was a tough taskmaster, but beneath the exterior was a kind and caring individual. I remember the first time I met Pravin Gordhan as Commissioner of SARS. I was not in a good space. Just the unfortunate experience of my wife being involved in an accident, and in that accident, 2 of my sisters and my mother passed on. I walked into his office, and the very first time I met him, he did not know me, but the kind of care that he showed, the kind of compassion that he displayed will remain with me for as long as I live. Pravin Gordhan has fought the good fight. He has finished the race. He has kept the faith. The battle is not over. We need to fight the good fight. We need to finish the race. Not because of anything, but in spite of the challenges, the uphills, and the frightening storm. We need to do this with determination, unwavering commitment, and not to be distracted in the in-between. You need to keep the faith. The cause is greater than ourselves. We need to emulate the example of Pravin Gordhan and do it with selflessness and integrity. If I could speak on behalf of Pravin Gordhan, I would say, fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. I thank you.
Thank you to the former colleagues for paying tribute to our former boss. I'm now going to be calling on former SARS spokesperson and family friend Adrian and family friend Momo. Adrian, you will know that when we are being called to a second floor for consultation with the boss, the first thing you ask Little Blessing. It's not little anymore now. She's sitting here. If the commissioner is doing like this, when you arrive in the office, you are in trouble. So he had eczema. So when it's up, if he does this, you walk in, you're like, what have I done now? So Adrian will know those moments that you just ask, Bless, are we in trouble? He says, yeah, you'll see for yourselves. And then he does this. Adrian Komasabli, he does this, and you are in trouble. Thank you, Adrian. Momo, I haven't seen you around. Is Momo around? Oh, yes. Okay. Come this side, brother.
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Edward, SARS Commissioner, and your team for arranging this beautiful memorial. To Mrs. Gordhan, Praisha, and Anisha, I think the past few weeks were exceptionally difficult. And the two of you, Anisha and Praisha, you displayed exceptional bravery in how you spoke about your father at the multiple platforms and in particular at the funeral. I struggle during this time, and I can only imagine how difficult it must be for your family. thank you for allowing us into your home, the opportunity to say goodbye to him, and to play a small role to help you through this difficult time, particularly with the media and addressing all the public nonsense that was published and spoken about your father. Thank you also to Commissioner Kieswetter, to Minister Manuel, Johan van Logrenberg and Momo, for availing yourselves and making the time to bring justice and dignity to the true legacy of Pravin Gordhan, and pushing back against all the noise and the attacks. In particular, one should also single out the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation for making their organization and their leadership available to be with the family, but also to ensure that there's proper public recognition of the life and the legacy of Pravin Gordhan. So Bantu probably took more hits than me at SARS from PG during the years. But I think, like many of us, it was a tremendous honor to have worked with him. So one small story from me. I joined SARS in 2003, September. Obviously, I was much younger then, and believe it or not, I still had hair. So the 2004 budget was my first. I was young, I was in my late 20s, not knowing what I was doing most of the time. So Thuraya Pandey was the head of communications at Treasury, and from SARS side, we were expected to provide support with the media and logistics. So we flew down to Cape Town the weekend before the Wednesday's budget, and we started preparations. And you work through the weekend when you are called to do things. You work the Monday, the Tuesday until late to prepare for the budget and draft whatever documents and speaking notes are required, and the media schedule that then kicks in from the Wednesday for the minister, the deputy minister, the DG, and the SARS commissioner. And then, so you're up at 4 on the day of the budget, you're at Parliament at 6 to get the media in. There's a few hundred journalists. We keep them under lockup, give them access to the documents, and so the proceedings start for the day. And at 8 o'clock the Wednesday night, all the important people go to what used to be the Old Mutual budget dinner, and that's when the rest of us can then take a breather. And of course, I go out partying with my media friends. And many of you know the story from this point onwards, but the next morning, the Thursday, there is the 6 a.m. budget breakfast, which is normally broadcast live on SABC. And of course, we all expect to be there early and to get things ready for when the principals come. I then never make that breakfast. And when I eventually do wake up, my phone, there's 100 missed calls, people looking for me. So I stumble into Parliament. It's the Thursday now. Our first engagement is 10 a.m. with SAFM, hour-long interview with the SARS Commissioner. So I get to the office after 9, and Nene looks at me, and she says, "You better go in and speak to your boss." He's alone in the big boardroom. I walk in, and he looks at me and he says, "Where were you?" I say, "I'm terribly sorry, Minister. I went out." And by this time, I'm completely hungover. I'm still trying to function. And I said, "I went out and I didn't make it. I couldn't wake up." And he looked at me and he said, "You know what? With your parents' permission and consent," and I'll never forget this phrase, "with your parents' permission and consent, I'm going to kick your ass. And I'm going to force you to get rid of this bohemian lifestyle." And I said sorry again, and said our next engagement is at 10, and that's where it ended. There was never vindictiveness in him. He tolerated a lot of my waywardness over the years, I guess. But then as I left the office then, I'm thinking, bohemian. I've got no idea what that. So I called Cindy August, was the head of the Parliament office. I said, "Cindy, you have a dictionary?" And I looked, bohemian. And, oh, okay. So, yeah, he was very patient with me. I think we found a particular chemistry of being able to work together. I learned a lot from him. I think he drove us hard at SARS, Minister Manuel, because he never wanted to disappoint you or the team at Treasury. And I think, having listened to all of you, that was a period, yeah, it was difficult to work under difficult conditions, and it demanded very much of the institution, but it was also a period where there was a sense of order in how things worked in government. There was mutual respect between SARS and the Treasury, and there was integrity in everything you did. And for us as underlings and subordinates, it made us feel that we are making a small contribution to build a sustainable democracy. Again, thank you very much for this memorial service, and I wish the Gordhan family strength during this time. Thank you very much.
Morning, everybody. I see it's not afternoon yet, 1 minute before. And to Vani, Anisha and Presha, I want to focus today a different perspective. I don't know why I've been put as a family friend. I am. But I want to talk from a Treasury perspective or a tax policy perspective. I promise I won't talk about how Pravin drove me mad. Like whilst we're preparing the speech, the budget review is printed, we meet on a Saturday and Sunday, and the inevitable would come up. Can he make an announcement on a dual VAT rate? Okay. Quercy, and we needed to caucus. How do you prevent the man from coming up with a suggestion? Aside from the merits of the suggestion, the issue is even I, who would change things at the last minute, wouldn't dare change things after the budget review was printed. It's just like Holy Grail. You just don't do it. But Pravin would want to do it. But I won't talk too much about that. I think clearly, and I think to all the colleagues here at SARS, Pravin was very proud of you. He loved SARS. He loved the people of SARS. He wanted to see SARS work. And he did so also because he understood the place of SARS in our democracy. If SARS did not bring the revenue, there wouldn't be much democracy to speak about, much to do in terms of allocating funds for critical services and so on. So he understood that perspective, and hence his whole approach on understanding the higher purpose if you worked at SARS. So SARS meant a lot to him, and that's why it was so painful to him to see how, despite more than a decade of building SARS, from 94 right up to 2014, how quickly it took to almost destroy SARS when the wrong appointment was made. Okay. That was a shock. It was a shock for me. I think it was a shock for everyone. And I think for Pravin's legacy, the question is, how do we prevent that? Because we don't know. You could still have a bad president. You could still have a bad commissioner. How do you prevent that? And that's where I want to pay tribute to Judge Nugent. And Judge Nugent, I failed to finish the job, okay? But we have to implement the Nugent Commission proposals. That's going to be fundamental. How you appoint the Commissioner of SARS must be an apolitical process. And whilst we did so when we appointed Commissioner Kiswetter, we need to put it into legislation so that it's clear. It's clearer, and it's harder for those who want to destroy our democracy to do so. And it's on that score, and I think Lasidia made a very important point. People who want to attack our democracy do it by attacking the institutions of democracy. And I liked his second point, and in addition to put a bad person on top of that institution. I think those are very wise words which we need to understand. They're simple, but they're important. And I want to talk about, and I'm glad Johan is here, because the so-called rogue unit attack was an attack on the institution. And when you have a leader, a commissioner who doesn't defend you, those things grow. We had Operation Spiderweb, another stupid intelligence report. But the shock of it is these things grow. But you had Mr. Nene as minister, and having a minister back us helped to destroy that story, right at this, nip it in the bud. Then you had the IFMS Integrated Financial Management story. When that attack started, you had a minister who was there after Pravin was fired, and it was meant against Pravin, against Trevor. They thought there must be something. It's a big contract. They must have had a hand in it. They must have got some money. Or that was a suggestion. It's not a shock that that was announced as an expose on ANN 7. Now the tragedy, I think, in our situation, and we didn't have a minister who defended us, the story has grown. Now expect attacks like those, because unless we're going to be alert and ready to fight all these absurd stories that come out, we're not going to be able to, we make it harder to resist these attacks on our democracy. So just to sum up, I think it would be in the best, the best thing we can do for the legacy of Pravin is, Commissioner Kiswater, to make SARS stronger, and you have made it stronger, but to make it even stronger, and for it to be the world-class institution it once was. It's getting there, but we need to do much work, and to make sure we implement the recommendations of the Nugent Commission and take into account, I think, what the Zondo Commission has also said. So thank you very much. Hamagashe. Pravin, I will miss you, and all the best and strength to the family.
I will call on another family friend, Judge Dennis Davis. Judge Davis.
I think it is good afternoon now. And I just want to first say to Vani and the family, it's almost impossible to say anything which is going to be particularly meaningful. But when I listened to Pravin's daughters at the funeral from television, I thought how proud he would have been of both of you. Just how you have carried on his legacy. And I think one should place that on record. I first met Pravin in a very meaningful way. I knew him before, at Cadessa. He was a chair of much of the negotiations when we were deciding on the interim constitution. Lawyers like myself and many of us thought we were such clever people who could pull the wool over the eyes of all these chairs and ensure that we could sneak in provisions into the constitution that they wouldn't know. But we all knew one thing. If Pravin Gordhan was the chair, then frankly you just had to stick to the script because he was far shrewder than you in keeping to the straight and narrow. It was quite an extraordinary situation. And therefore, some years later, when the Katz Commission of Inquiry, in its central first report, focused attention on the viability of SARS and its independence and what it should be, the question was, who is going to run this institution for a new democratic South Africa? And I have to say that Trevor Manuel, you did a couple of other decent things, I accept, but the inspired idea of appointing Pravin Gordhan as the Commissioner of Inland Revenue was an utterly remarkable decision.
Because think about it, it's true what Trevor said earlier, that you could perhaps have appointed him something else. He wasn't a tax person. But what was implicit in the decision and what he vindicated 1,000 times over was what you wanted as a Commissioner of Inland Revenue was someone who had the vision, someone who had the dedication, and someone who had the understanding of what an institution of state should be for a democratic constitutional society. And Pravin embraced that in quite extraordinary ways. Indeed, what is so interesting to me is, notwithstanding a period under an individual who shall not be named, the reality is that the Commissioner, the SARS Commission now, under Commissioner Kieswetter, has effectively started, and in a very meaningful way, to produce a 21st century model of that which Pravin started 30 years ago. That's what's so remarkable. That's the legacy. And it's a legacy which I just want to, a little bit later, just say something about, if I may. But the other aspect about Pravin Gordhan, which was that everybody's commented on, and rightly so, but perhaps I think was not enough anger, is the outrageous way in which he was treated by populist politicians to this day. People who, in fact, are very much at the forefront of corruption and who have the absolute gall to call into question a reputation of someone who I certainly regard as a model constitutional citizen. I'm also not prepared to forgive the NPA in that period for what they did to Pravin and indeed his family, and nor to the then public protector, although perhaps better placed as someone whom the public needed protection from. And the reason we need to think about the way Pravin was treated is because it actually answers what Momo was talking about. How do you ensure a constitutional democracy? You ensure that you will never, ever make those mistakes again. And therefore, what we are celebrating today is somebody who did something utterly remarkable as the Commissioner of Inland Revenue, which is to actually create an institution which all of you are continuing to actually fulfill in all manifest manner of means. I was particularly interested, and I documented this in an obituary that I wrote on behalf of Pravin in the Daily Maverick. A little while ago, 6-7 months ago, if I recall correctly, we needed to have a venue in Cape Town to discuss one of Pravin's last projects, one which has often been forgotten in all of this morass of abuse which he suffered for so long, which was the reconstruction of state enterprises by virtue of a bill which was going to parallel the Singapore model. And so we needed a venue. And I got the wise idea, asking JP whether we could use the 8th floor of the building where I am located, and she said absolutely fine. And we all arrived, and Pravin then arrived, because he was, of course, the minister. And within half an hour, the word got out that Pravin was in the building. And all of these people who had been at SARS for many years suddenly started emerging on the 8th floor, either wanting a selfie, or to hug Pravin, or to just embrace him. And I thought, what a remarkable legacy, that all of these years after he left SARS, people felt this extraordinary loyalty for a man who had done so much for them. And I asked Pravin about these people. And he said, you know, many of them, I wasn't sure at the time whether they knew much about tax, etc., but I saw in them a light where they were going to do good things. And that, again, was part of the leadership which Pravin, in fact, performed over all this period. And just one other aspect. Much has been spoken about the fact that Pravin Gordhan asked us to join the dots. He, more than any other South African, stood in the way of state capture. When people kept quiet, when people just went along their business without doing anything, he was effectively the leader of the opposition in South Africa. And we should never forget that role, because that is a role which you have to play
if you are to preserve democracy. Momo asks the question, how do we actually ensure that we don't repeat this? We ensure that we have an active citizenry. We ensure that by having people like Pravin. We ensure that by having people who understand what a constitutional democracy means and how you fight for it. And so, when I reflect on Pravin's life, just my final comment, I've always thought of him as a mentor in all sorts of ways. And it's extraordinary, he's only about 2 years older than me, but somehow he was always a father figure. And as I've said often before, and I want to say again, whenever, over a long period of time, I was despondent about the possibility of a non-racial, non-sexist democracy, Pravin was always there to assure me that it would happen, but it required a fight, and it wasn't going to happen easily. And I don't know what I'm going to do in future. Who will I look to? The answer is to look to his memory. And all of you who work for the South African Revenue Service now, an institution which has miraculously resurrected itself into the jewel of the state crown, all the good work that you do, and I've watched this as being part of your institution for a while, you actually vindicate Pravin's legacy. And if we ask ourselves on this day, what should we be doing? Do what you're doing now and more. Because if we have a South African Revenue Service that actually collects the money and we can hold government accountable, we can actually get somewhere. And by the way, Momo, perhaps the one thing you might want to consider in all these proposals is the fact that SARS gets adequate funding in order to do its job properly. And I would want to say that that would be truly vindicating the legacy of Pravin. To Vani and to the family, you've lost a beloved husband, an extraordinary father. I have lost an incredible friend, and the country has lost one of its great citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Davis. We're going to call two colleagues who worked under the Commissioner. We call it OOC, it's Office of the Commissioner. Them and amongst us, we announced here that there's a smoking area and all that. When he comes out of the parking, he goes to his office in Block A then. People smoke because there are designated smoking areas. Then says, why are these people standing outside? I said, but Commissioner, they are smoking. Why can't they work? I said, it's designated, Commissioner. Go and tell them to go in. Jean and Blessing.
I would like to acknowledge in our presence Mrs. Gordhan, Anisha, Pranisha, our former colleagues, distinguished guests, SARS leadership, all protocol observed. I've had an honor of working with Mr. Pravin Gordhan from 2000 to 2005, when he was the SARS Commissioner. During this time, his leadership stood impeccable. Mr. Gordhan saw us as more than just employees and subordinates. To some of us, he took on a role of a leader, a parent, and an elder. I recall of an incident when he sat me down and raised a concern on my casual look at life. In my youth at the time, my focus was on aesthetics, including trendy hairstyles. God, PG sat me down, he did not spare me. As he advised me on reevaluating my priorities in accordance to my needs and wants. And I must say, on that day we sat down, went through my budget, item by item. The lessons learned during his tenure have been ingrained in our hearts and minds. With a heavy heart,
I take with me in my professional life all the lessons, knowledge he imparted, and hope that his teachings will continue to live on through all whose lives he has impacted. I want to thank you, Mrs. Gordhan, Pranisha, Anisha, for your selflessness in allowing us to experience Mr. Gordhan, not only as a leader, but his love for his family was undeniably the foundation of everything he did. I pray that you find strength as you navigate your lives without him. Tsela tshweu umhale wa rona. Hamba kahle qhawe lethu. Rest in peace.
Good afternoon. Condolences to the Gordhan family. I met Mr. Gordhan for the first time on the 5th of March, 1998. I think it was 5 days after he joined SARS as Deputy Commissioner. I got a call that the Deputy Commissioner wanted to see me. I didn't know him. I heard there was this new Deputy Commissioner around. To cut the long story short, after our short discussion, he asked me to move into his office. I was one of his first assistants at the time. I worked with Aidan Kindley, Herman Smith, and I think Mandy in that office. I want to focus on the lessons that I learned personally from him. He believed in inclusivity. He believed that as he transforms this institution, he carries everybody along. Even the way the SARS structure or organogram was structured, he made sure that it reflects the demographics of our society. He also believed in going out and looking for skills that are not within the organization, and also building capacity within the organization to perform its tasks. The second principle is integrity. He made me understand integrity in a different way. So I won't mention the colleague, but a number of colleagues used to come to his office to gossip about other colleagues. So then PG would say to them, "Are you prepared to repeat this in their presence?" Once they seem reluctant, he would never take them seriously after that. I asked him, "But these are whistleblowers. Why are you doing this to whistleblowers?" His response was, "No, they are not whistleblowers, they are gossipers. And they lack integrity." He said if they had integrity, they would have gone to their colleague and say, "Hey, I'm concerned about the following," before they escalated to me. So he made me look at integrity differently. The third principle was humility. He always told us to humble ourselves at all times. I was fortunate to attend a number of DG cluster meetings on his behalf. And I carried that lesson of humility with me. You listen attentively and you speak when it's absolutely necessary for you to do so. The last principle was empathy. Pravin was a caring boss. He was a father to many of us. He was interested in how things were going in our personal lives. He would walk to our offices and ask, how's the flow? How are the lights? He'll say, bring the lighties to the office on Friday afternoon. That's the kind of boss that he was. He'd be dearly missed by many. Thank you.
We
Can we please call the next speakers to the Patrick Moeng?
Hayo, 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 matata, hayo, matata, hayo, mudi, hayo, 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 matata, hayo, matata, hayo, mudi,
I will first like to apologize. We're running out of time, over time. We do not want to take your time for granted. Apologies. We could not time out the special guest speakers. So we apologize for that. We are running exactly an hour late. We are managing it. The colleagues who are going to speak now, led by Patrick, are going to be short, taking into account the time that we do not have. So it's going to be Patrick, it's Besinkosi, Bayers, Douglas, Intikap, Divani, Nene, and Mamiki. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Program Director Sobantu. Distinguished guest, Mrs. Gordhan and the family, colleagues from SARS, all protocol observed. Colleagues, as the Program Director has indicated, we are going to be very short. I think after the judge had spoken, I asked myself, what is it that I'm going to say? And I think many of my colleagues and those who knew the Commissioner said a mouthful. I had to change my speech on many occasions, but I decided that I'm not going to forgo a number of lessons that I have learned from the father that we have lost. PG was a father, not only the Commissioner to us. We shared him with you. He spent most of his time with us,
not only as the organization, but with the country and the movement that he served. We learned beautiful lessons from PG. The 2 or 3 that I will pick up are based on integrity. He exhumed with the lessons of integrity. We used to call him Mwalimu, after the former leader called Julius Nyerere, basically because his teachings still remain with us. He may have gone from us, but the teachings that he left with us on integrity that one of my colleagues have spoken about are still going to linger with us for a time to come. His loyalty to the organization, to the country, as well as its people, was actually seen in his steward leadership, which he has also instilled in us. When he spoke about the higher purpose, I think everyone in SARS understands what the higher purpose means to everything that we do. The humility with which we treat the people or the taxpayers comes from the lessons that we have learned from Ntate Pravin Gordhan. He was Ntate to us because he lived the principles of fatherhood and leadership. He cared about each and everybody, and then he instilled with us the knowledge that if we have to assist the government in ensuring that the 3 challenges of unemployment, inequality, as well as poverty are dealt with, is going to be because of the work that we are doing. As a father, we used to take him as a foot soldier again on a number of occasions. When the former minister spoke about him as a campaigning tax commissioner, he was correct. We took Ntate Gordhan to meet with people of small business industry, from the music industry, from the VIP, as in the members of parliament who were serving for the first time after South Africa was declared ungovernable before 1994. He made it his task when he came here to tell us that we need to go and assist South Africans to demilitarize and come into the compliance basket so that we can build the country together. I would like to stop there to say that we have lost a teacher, we have lost a leader, we have lost a father that you shared with us, and I would like to thank the family for that, and SARS for providing us with this opportunity to reminisce about our leader. Thank you very much.
Sanbonani, good afternoon to Mama Gordhan and the family, to the esteemed guest, Commissioner, and all the SARS family. I would remember Umnumzane PG with the good governance that he has bestowed within the organization. I am standing in today, still marching and continuing with the way he has taught us. In the corners of all the regions, we would remember Mr. Gordhan and his teaching. SARS, it is what it is today because of his teaching. We will continue. A lot of work is done, as Commissioner would always say, but still a lot of work still needs to be done. I remember as we were looking at the funeral of Mr. Gordhan, my mom said, "This is the man that taught me to watch the budget speech because I'm going to get extra rent." And for that, she gathered all the women around the town where I was staying because I was working for SARS. And every time there's a budget speech, it would be a gathering. And we know that they would be receiving a little extra. And for that, to all the SARS colleagues, we are making an impact. Let's continue to do that. In our little corners in all the regions, may we continue to shine the light that will show that we were in the leadership of a good citizen. To the Gordhan's family, may God be with you. Hamba kahle mnumzane. Siyohlala sikhumbula njalo.
To the program director and the Gordhan family, Commissioner, all protocol observed. Somewhere around 2000, 2001, there was a small group of people, and Vuso referred to that under what was called the Customs Transformation Program. And they were thinking about the future of customs and where do we go with customs. They built a blueprint and a roadmap. And it was more or less at the same time that we were getting ready for SIACA 1. And the consulting firm that was appointed actually SARS didn't organize the flybys. But at that time, SARS were gearing itself up for SIACA, and as I said, the consulting firm excluded the customs part out of the scope of SIACA. So at this time, the Commissioner then, Commissioner Gordhan, hosted an international forum. It was for taxation, but he decided to put a slot down for customs. And there were very important people there, and 2 or 3 of these youngsters that was working in the transformation program were asked to go and present there. All these ideas, I would not use the words that he used before we went in there, but he was wanting to go and test what we were thinking about against what do people in the world know, and there was an ex-commissioner for UK Customs, Sandy Russell, also in that audience. So when we finished the presentation, you could hear a pin drop in that room, and it was Sandy Russell who actually broke the ice, and he asked, what are you guys thinking of here at the tip of Africa? We're not thinking about these things in Europe. In fact, we're not even talking about that. But for us, the die was cast, because out of that, PG forced us into the SIACA program, number 1. There was a new brand of customs that started, a new capability such as post-clearance inspection or audit, risk management, anti-smuggling was birthed. And there was also a new interest in the work of the WCO, or the World Customs Organization. So 2001 was also the year of 9/11. And the world of customs was caught unawares. And there was a scramble in Brussels at the WCO in terms of thinking, where do we go to? We need to be security focused. And it was PG who became the voice for the developing countries to stand up against a pure security focus and fight for a balance between security and trade facilitation. So at the WCO, a renewed focus in promoting integrity, some instrument that is called the WCO Framework of Standards, and the establishment of the Capacity Building Directorate, together with an unprecedented 5-year term as the chairperson of the WCO, all forms part of the legacy of Mr. Gordhan. Today, that legacy is alive and well in the corridors of the WCO. You will also find that if you go into social media and all the customs groups across the world, they all commemorate PG for what he was to customs. He was the one who stood up and could challenge the big guns of the world and bring the small guns to the party when it came to customs. So here at SARS, many of us have lived through those long, extended, very difficult management sessions. Many of us survived a decent whack when you tried to fudge a response on something that he probably knew the answer much better than you. Many of us experienced the excitement of walking with him through the back streets of Joburg or Belleville, as was referred to this morning. And for us, or for me at least, he was more than a boss in doing all those things. He was a true inspiration, and he left an indelible mark on many of us here in SARS. Left the indelible mark on SARS and on South Africa. So when PG in 2001 put those youngsters on the platform, he did what he's very good at, empowering people to grow, encouraging people to think outside of the box, and pushing people to excel. PG, we will miss you. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the Gordhan family. SARS Commissioner, and all protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, with PG, you have to know your story. He visited Polokwane. I won't mention the year because you'll assume I'm 77 years old. He did the normal meter greeting. It was all smiles. Then came the meeting time. And he deliberately wanted to address the employees. Remember, we were expecting the announcements of the bonus payment dates and all that. But what he did, he posed important questions for us to answer. First, he wanted to know whether, do we know how much is the tax gap? Then we say, oh, tax gap. Then he wanted to know whether are we aware of the percentage that the region is contributing revenue-wise to the national revenue. We were all stunned. Then he came back home and said, okay, do you know the number of active taxpayers within the Polokwane branch? Then I looked at my leader. Already he had whipped out a cigarette, unaware. That was PG for you. At the end of the day, he was able to articulate and explain to us the importance of us knowing our business. Because we cannot profess to be providing good service while we don't know our taxpayers. We are unable to adequately engage the taxpayers when we do not know their pain points. That was PG for you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Good afternoon. I've been asked to be short, but I cannot not be fat. It's possible. To the immediate Gordhan family and to the extended Gordhan family, sincere condolences. But I think it's not a time for commiserations. It's actually time for celebration. P, for patriarch. When I arrived at head office, I was young and needed a father figure. And wow, did he fulfill that role. But he didn't ask my parents, Adrian. He just did it. Revolutionary. He could revolutionize an idea into reality with gusto. Any idea. Activist. Always agitating. Always pushing for the greater good. Valiant. He stood up in the face of adversity with bravery and courage. Integrity. He was the epitome of integrity. Nurturing. Sometimes hard, sometimes soft, but always pushing for one to be the best of yourself. Pravin. A simple man with absolute integrity that lived for a better life for all. A short anecdote. In about 2003, I was offered a job in the Middle East. About 5 times the salary I was earning in South Africa. And also it was close to the Holy Land. So for me, a big deal. And I wrote to him and I said, you know, Commissioner, you're not only our boss, but you're a mentor. What do you think? And he wrote one sentence back. There is still a lot to be done in South Africa. And here I am today. I've never left, and I don't think I will leave unless it's in a coffin, Commissioner. I don't know many skis. The only ski I know is Shemansky. That's where my wife takes me, right? So I can't quote Ramsky, but I would like to quote the Holy Prophet of Islam. Your actions are judged according to their intentions. and to every man is due that for which he is intended. And his intentions were only for the higher purpose. He may be physically gone, but his legacy lives on. Let us remember, I am his legacy. We are his legacy. Let us strive without fear or favor for the higher purpose. Thank you.
Namaste to the Gordhan family. Greetings to our esteemed guests, SARS Commissioner and colleagues. I'm honored today to be able to share a few fond memories that I had with the late Minister Pravin Gordhan. I had the privilege of not only calling him Minister and Commissioner, but also Uncle Pravin. My mum used to work at a pharmacy in the North Coast in the late 80s, where the late Minister was a pharmacist. Whenever we went to fetch her from work, he would chat to my sisters and I, often asking us about our studies. I then met him when I was a consultant at the Durban SARS branch when he was appointed as Commissioner. I remember jokingly asking him whether I should still call him Uncle Pravin or Commissioner, and he just smiled. My fondest memories are of him visiting the Carlton Centre branch office, which I used to manage. He would come in on a Saturday morning during filing season, and he would just smile and say to me, "Hello, Auntie." And he would then make his way to the long queues, talking to taxpayers, shaking hands, and chatting to them. He then went behind the counters to speak to the staff, thanking them for leaving their families on the weekend so that they could assist taxpayers to file tax returns. My staff were extremely appreciative, as this showed them that their hard work was not going unnoticed, especially by the senior leadership. In fact, it actually inspired them to do more. Whenever he addressed us at the National Management Forums, I would listen in awe, as he was so inspirational. His words were powerful, and I admired how strong and dedicated he was. One of the main reasons I have remained with the organization for 30 years is due to Minister Gordhan's words, encouraging us to make a difference in the lives of ordinary people. He inspired me to be a better leader. If he, as a commissioner and minister, could visit my staff and just speak to them as people and not only employees, then surely I could take the time to care as much. And that is something I pass on to my teams so that they understand that our taxpayers are people just like us. We need to be able to carry out our duties, understanding that there are negative elements, but at the same time, we need to be humble and respectful in the way in which we do this. I think it's important that we pay it forward to ensure that we create future leaders who are empathetic, but also fight to make a positive difference to the people of our beautiful country. To the Gordhan family, thank you for sharing your precious husband and father with us. May God bless you all, and may God bless Minister Gordhan's soul. Thank you very much.
This is something I really wanted to do, although my job was mostly to write up those impossible pictures that Minister drew that everyone spoke about. And I would like to share with you something of the man that not everyone always got to see. And I think for me, when anyone asks me, what is integrity, what is ethics, then I cannot but think of Pravin. And it's the things that he did when no one looked and when no one cared. I had the privilege of helping him set up the ministry. We had a ministerial handbook, and then we had Pravin Gordhan's handbook, which was nothing like what was prescribed. Pravin didn't travel if he didn't know what the cost of a hotel room was. They once booked him into a suite, and he looked at this, and you know, as an office, you didn't have control over the arrangements in another country. DOCO would do it. And Minister said to me, "How much is the suite?" And I said, "No, I don't know." He said, "It is your job to always know what taxpayers' money is spent on. Find out." And so I found out he didn't ask me. I was hoping he'd forget. He didn't forget. When we were in the combi, traveling to the hotel, he said, "What, and now this hotel room?" I said, "No, this is the cost." He didn't say much, but he frowned. And upon our arrival, there was a whole reception of people. The ambassador, senior staff members were there to welcome him. And Minister looked at them and he said to them, "Why are you wasting taxpayers' money? Do you understand how much it is to collect this amount of money? And do you understand how many RDP houses we can build for this amount of money? Find me a cheaper room." And so, Minister was found a cheaper room. He also refused to move into the houses that Public Works would find for him. They were all too expensive. They were ridiculously expensive. He called the Minister of Public Works into his office and he demanded that a cheaper house be found for him. He refused to furnish his house from the expensive tenders and the fancy furnished providers that Public Works had on their records. Minister furnished his first ministerial residence from the Department of Public Works storeroom. He said that that furniture was perfectly workable and that it would work for him. So I think the lesson for us is that our money was always safe in the hands of Pravin Gordhan. He always did the right thing. He walked the talk, even when no one cared, and when there was a handbook that told him he could do it differently. He always did it, bearing in mind the people that we served. And then I'm conscious of time. I just want to say that when a lot of state capture was happening, and I think those of us at SARS understood that things were getting quite bad. I remember speaking to him, and I said to him, "Boss, what must we do? Do we leave? Do we stay?" And he looked at me and he said, "You do your job. You don't serve an individual. You work for the South African country. You do your job. You know what needs to be done." And I think, as it is impossible for us to start moving forward, I just remind myself that I'm going to do what Pravin told me to do my job and to do it well. And I think just, there's so much I can tell you, but any event, Pravin was always a pharmacist with those of us who worked in his office. We didn't have Poppy and we didn't have client doctor confidentiality. If you were sick or one of your members of your family was sick, Minister would say, "Yes, so what does the doctor say?" We would say, "No, tests were done." Minister would say, "What tests? What's the dosage? Why in that format?" And even when he was minister, there was someone with a health problem. He insisted that we phone up that specialist, bless. And he said, "This is Pravin Gordhan. Yes, I'm the Minister of Finance, but that's not why I'm calling." And he insisted on this doctor explaining to him the treatment regime that he had worked out for one of his staff members. And I think what made Pravin unique at SARS and why he's the Commissioner we will never forget is the way that he walked the floors. He saw us as individuals, and he was always the last to leave. And this organization, SARS, has remained resilient, and we will remain resilient because of the foundation that Pravin laid here. As so many of you said, he created an institution. But Pravin didn't just create an institution, he built a community. And Vani and Priyesha and Anisha, you will always be part of that community for us here at SARS. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Program Director. And greetings to my colleagues that are here with us and joining us online. Let me start first by thanking the family. Mrs. Gordhan, thank you. Anisha, thank you. Priyesha, thank you. And I think for me, especially Priyesha, because the many, many milestones that we celebrated in SARS, she was the and she would come in her school uniform. Sometimes I would chat to her about schooling. And for me to see her as a young lady today, I want to send my condolences, because 18 years ago, when I lost my dad, your dad gave me incredible support, incredible outpouring of love. So it's only fit that today, as nervous as I am, that I come and I say to you, condolences. To the family, for every day, every year that the Commissioner spent with us, and I'm going to call him Commissioner, even when he became the Minister, I still called him Commissioner, that every moment that he spent with us was worth sharing, and it has shaped me as a professional, it has shaped my colleagues as they've attested, and he's shaped the institution into what it has become. So when I joined SARS in 2002, for my DG, I also went through the annual report because I was preparing myself for interviews. And a couple of things that struck me, because that was his first annual report. And he mentioned in the annual report that the activities and the changing character of SARS are best captured by the image of a caterpillar changing into an elegant butterfly. SARS is no longer the caterpillar, but neither has it become the complete butterfly. There is still a lot to achieve. And this is what captured my imagination. But more importantly, he also spoke about the higher purpose, which everybody has made reference to. That for me, it said, I can join an institution where you can change the world, you can change South Africa, you can change the trajectory of our democracy. I will not quote what our current higher purpose mentions, but it is in the obituary and it still resonates to me today as it did when I was preparing myself to join SARS. Transformation in SARS would not have happened the way it did had it not been for our Commissioner. Whether it was the modernization of our infrastructure, IT systems, whether it was modernization of our profile and demographic of our human capital or business processes, or even our standing in terms of world leadership. There's already been mention about his role as the WCO chairperson 2000 to 2006. It made it so much easier for us, those that followed, to be able to stand in front of international platforms and strongly and proudly represent our country. The story of SARS is worth telling, and the story of SARS is worth sharing, because we have transformed ourselves so incredibly that you see, and I've again reread some of the business cases that have been written, documented about, and from scholars, from local and international universities and business schools that speak about the growth and the path that we've undertaken. We have much more to be proud of in terms of what we've achieved as an institution. As I close off, Minister Manuel, you mentioned the T-shirt, you and the Commissioner wearing the cricket T-shirt. That was in 2007. It was the 31st of March. If you Google that day, it was a Saturday. We announced not only on the first day of the next year, but we announced on the 31st of March our revenue results, and this was in Cape Town, and in that year, we were celebrating us hosting the 2007 Cricket World Cup. That's why you were wearing the cricket T-shirt. There are many, many anecdotes and stories that I can tell about our Commissioner, but I think for today, it's just to thank him for his service. He has left an indelible legacy at SARS, and ra leboga. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamiki. We're going to go straight to the Gordhan family's daughters, Anisha and Priyesha. Now, Minister, you can come to guys. Mamiki, who's just been here, us non-financial people, we know we don't play with her. She'll take you to clean us. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, all protocols observed, good afternoon. As a family, we'd like to thank you for honoring and celebrating the life of our father, Pravin Gordhan. The past 2 weeks have been a bit surreal for us, but the overwhelming outpouring of love and support, the acknowledgement of the contribution our father has made to this country and its people has provided a lot of comfort. Today, it feels like we've come home. Seeing people like Nene, Blessing, Nene, Mandy, Deerwald has been very emotional for us, including seeing the dog Quinn. Thank you to the staff and management of SARS. Thank you, Edward, for hosting us today. Today we celebrate a man who has made immense sacrifices for the liberation of this country since his teenage years. He was an activist, a freedom fighter, a liberator. He was a struggle hero, a strategic thinker, and an organizer. He was an intelligent man with a thirst for knowledge. He was an optimist, a collaborator, and a unifier. He lived a principled life, a life of utmost integrity. He was a husband, a father, a brother, a devoted family man. But mostly, my father cared for the people of this country, and his life's work was focused on uplifting the poor, protecting the needy, and building a non-sexist, non-racial, democratic South Africa. On Thursday, I spoke of his history, his early days as a student activist in the 1970s, his underground activist days, and his work as a key negotiator during the transition to democracy. When my father was appointed as SARS Commissioner, I asked him what he knew about tax and running a formal institution. In my ignorant, narrow view, his working experience was limited to what he did in the struggle. How does smuggling arms, planning undercover operations, and mass meetings equip a man to run a large tax collection institution? It was beyond me. But it was this training in his early days that equipped him to be one of the most effective public servants of our time. His work was based on the basic principles of organize, conscientize, and mobilize. My father became SARS Commissioner in 1999, and I started working at Deloitte Consulting as a strategy consultant in the year 2000. A lot of our visits and time spent together at the time was spent talking about process optimization, organizational design, and developing management systems. This was how he organized. But his principal belief was to create a world-class tax collection institution, and to do that, the culture of the people had to shift. After all, the famous saying of culture eats strategy for breakfast applies. His non-racialism was shown in his belief of retaining institutional knowledge and skills, and to embark on a process of capability transfer, because that's what ensured sustainability. So he mobilized and he conscientized the people to buy into a vision of SARS that was not merely a tax collection agency, but one that had a higher purpose. The higher purpose, he would tell the people at SARS, was to gather enough tax money to fund the fiscus, to provide the poor with grants, to provide proper schools to children, decent hospitals for the needy, and all of that for those who previously had been denied those privileges. In other words, his work was driven by serving the people of South Africa, by creating a culture of compliance and service, and he excelled. He built an institution that was respected globally as the best of its kind. The IRS, the Harvard Business School, and other tax agencies now use SARS as the benchmark on how to do it best. These were his happiest years, and he made a profound impact. He thrived. A funny story that speaks to my dad's commitment to compliance, his integrity and ethics is I was working in Dubai on a project in 2003 and 2004. I had spoken to him on the telephone, and it was at the time when electronic cameras were just launched. And so I told my father that I had bought one. He had a customs official waiting at the airport to collect me so that I declared the camera. During 2014, my father started becoming concerned at what he was seeing emerging around him. A new SARS commissioner with total disregard for any higher purpose was appointed. The noise and attacks against our father started gaining momentum. On 9 December 2015, my father asked me to meet him for dinner. It was one of those rare occasions when we had time alone together. When he emerged from the car, he looked visibly shaken and upset. He explained to me that he had not attended the cabinet meeting on that day because things were becoming difficult in cabinet. He was concerned that Minister Nene was being put under significant pressure by the then president. He showed me a letter that he had received from Judge Kroon, which made all sorts of wild allegations against him. He explained the concept of state capture to me. And as the dinner progressed, the message of Minister Nene's firing came through. He quickly ended dinner and rushed off to Pretoria. The next few days were spent reassuring the business community, mobilizing a movement to stop the capture of Treasury. The weekend special was appointed and then unceremoniously gone. My father was again put in to protect the fiscus. During the budget preparation in 2016, the famous 27 questions were sent to my father by the Hawks. He was called to a meeting in Johannesburg the night before the budget speech. This was a way to put him under pressure. The top 6 scrutinized his speech, cut out large parts, and he returned to Cape Town to deliver what was significantly a watered-down version of what he planned to say. On our way to the budget speech, I asked my father what he believed was going on and why the sudden attacks on him and SARS the SARS investigating unit specifically. He explained to me that this was part of a slow, tactical 50-stage war, the war to protect South Africa from being captured by a bunch of thugs. He faced endless threats, embarrassments like arrest warrants, trumped-up charges, but he never faltered. His moral stature, diligence, and impeccable integrity were never compromised. Like the president said, there was never any doubt where Pravin Gordhan stood. He always stood on the right side of history, and he always stood for truth. The years that followed the start of the 50-stage war were brutal. Innocent public servants were framed and harassed simply because they had done brilliant work, like the SARS investigating unit. They were on point, excuse the pun. People like Ivan Pillay, Peter Richer, Andries Janse van Rensburg, Johan van Rockenberg, Adrian Lakay, Yulisa Peki, Peter de Bot, Gilbert Gunn, Nkele Pitsi, Shoban Wilson, Talita Snickers, Charles Fourie, Jean Ravella, and Mareka Muller suffered immense loss and personal attacks. These names must never be forgotten. My father worked tirelessly to protect these people and didn't stop until the truth of the so-called rogue unit emerged and his people were vindicated. Thank you to these brave souls and to their families for your sacrifices and for standing by my father's side through what can only be described as one of the darkest periods in South African history. In April 2017, after a harrowing week, my father and Nsibisi Jonas were fired based on an unintelligent intelligence report. He was informed of the firing on national news, not by the president. We didn't sleep through the night. He called the next morning and asked me to join his press conference as he was about to disclose some important information. The atmosphere at National Treasury was electrifying. Staff had gathered on all floors of the building and loudly sang Senzanina, a protest, a struggle, freedom song, that meaning, what have we done? I asked him what stage of the war we were on, and he said stage 3. After his press conference, his focus was to mobilize key staff at Treasury who wanted to resign. He literally begged them to stay to protect the state. A new finance minister entered the building, and the work to try to capture National Treasury and SARS was turned up a notch. To those that remained and fought the fight alongside my dad, I thank you. What followed was years of harassment, despite the loud public outcry in support of Pravin. During the march to the Union buildings in April 2017, I received a call saying that Black First, Land First, the thugs, had gathered outside my home and were threatening to break in. They wanted Pravin. It was all aired on a propaganda machine called ANN7, set up by the Zuptas. They immediately dispersed when they got a call to protect the Gupta's home, where people had gathered to protest. When I returned home and tried to go to the police station to lay a complaint about an illegal protest, I wasn't allowed to. The warrant officer refused to take my statement, and my father and I felt like we were back in the apartheid days with no law enforcement to protect the innocent. I again asked him what stage we were on. His answer was 3.1. During the 9 wasted years, the erosion of technical skills and the focused effort to remove good, honest people and replace them with unprincipled, malleable people who served their personal interests. This is what destroyed many well-functioning institutions and led to an almost failed state. To rebuild what was destroyed will take decades. My father firmly believed that in building a developmental state, our economy would thrive and our people will be lifted from the throes of poverty. His main focus and objective was to build sustainable institutions that effectively delivered services to the people of this country to protect jobs and families. When he became the Minister of Public Enterprises in 2018, his primary focus was to make sure, first and foremost, that all the honest, dedicated, and committed employees of the state-owned enterprises and their families didn't experience any hardship by losing their jobs. He believed that jobs were at the heart of development. He did not see a job as a mere cost line on an income statement. A job for him was about growing families, uplifting them out of poverty, creating meaningful work in a productive society. He again came under attack for cutting short the arms of the corrupt. Again, I asked him what stage of the war we were on. He said it was stage 25. My father believed that we could all make South Africa great again, and that transformation will be built through economic participation, partnerships, and mobilization of all our capacities. It is a transformation that must unite, not divide South Africans. He worked furiously to protect our institutions and lay a solid foundation for future generations. He wanted change for the better, he wanted transformation, and he wanted delivery. The lesson we should take from my father is that we should never be afraid to speak out. We must protect whistleblowers who are the courageous, brave souls that endure significant hardship to save our institutions. They risked their lives, lost income, and suffered many threats to their personal safety. We must honor them by keeping each other honest, holding each other responsible to be better citizens and patriots of this country. We must practice the spirit of Ubuntu and work to serve and build each other and not just ourselves. We must speak out like he did. Today I ask you to make my father proud and honor his legacy by no longer burying your heads in the sand. Never to feel powerless, but to recognize the immense strength that lies in our hands as a diverse, talented, vibrant family of South Africa. We must use our unique talents, gifts, skills, and hearts to come together to be the very best that we can be individually and together. We must follow his example of being a dedicated, committed servant of the people. We must stop talking and we must start doing. My father deserves to be remembered as the courageous, extraordinary person who served the people of this country with great distinction and made a real difference to their lives. As he said, the public should mobilize. Fragmented voices don't have the weight it requires. Masses make history, not individuals. I end with a quote from Madiba. What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is the difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. I thank you.
Hello, everyone. Wanted to say thank you for arranging this in honor of my dad, and hearing how much he is loved and respected warms my heart and the heart of our family more than I can express. I've written and delivered more speeches in this past week than I ever intended to. And actually, I wrote speeches with my dad, meaning that he dictated while I typed for him. But for his last NIC speech, we sat together, partly at the dining room table, partly in bed because he was in pain. And I never thought I would have to write speeches for myself to deliver without him. The South African Revenue Service plays a big role in our lives as a family. We got a second family from the people at SARS. I've got a whole new range of aunties, Auntie Nene, Mandy, Auntie Janae, Joe, and a sister in Blessing, Uncles Musa, Richard, William, Dierwald. Adrian was a bit too young to be my uncle at that point. I've spent a lot of my formative years here, and walking back into Block A, I felt the same nostalgia as if I was walking back into my family home. A few of my stories about SARS, most people already know the 251. In the early 2000s, a DVD had come out of my favorite movie. I didn't know it was a pirated copy. And the whole piracy campaign with the big skull, it was flashing across all of our screens, and my dad took my favorite DVD and he threw it in the bin. Something I still haven't forgiven him for. He also somehow made me a SARS deployee on the ground, looking at people's license plates and trying to figure out if they did in fact pay their taxes. Every year, the 31st of March and the 1st of April, the collection days, were something that I genuinely looked forward to, and it became an important tradition in our household. I loved the themes that were held every year, and I loved watching the SARS family succeed and overachieve year after year. One particular year, the theme was mountain climbing, and I sat and I changed the lyrics to the song Ain't No Mountain High Enough and added, to keep SARS from reaching its target at the end, and a choir was arranged and they performed the song the next day. And it was one of my fondest memories, and in a small way collaborating with this phenomenal team. I couldn't understand why people didn't want to pay their taxes until I became a taxpayer myself. And SARS had more than just my 250. My dad was so invested in each and every one of his colleagues and employees, and he received no greater joy than watching all of you grow, succeed, and reach the potential that he knew was in you. A huge part of his goal was to develop young black professionals to try and diminish the disadvantages that the apartheid regime had thrust and forced upon us. And he was so proud of those who stood up against the maladministration and fought to keep the integrity of this great institution. It was saddening and sickening to see the transparent attempts to capture SARS, and we all saw the toll it took on his psyche and ours as well. It was our family being dismantled. I am committed to continuing his fight and honoring his legacy, but what is amazing is that it's not only his family that is his legacy. You are all his legacy. So please continue to make him proud. Thank you.
Thank you to the family, to the two daughters, Anisha and Priyasha. Thank you for your contributions today. Ladies and gentlemen, I will not take any more time of your time. We will call upon the keynote speaker, the Commissioner of SARS, Mr. Edward Kisweta. Nobody warned us that we're on TV. Commissioner.
Thanks, we greeted you this morning, and now we have to say good afternoon. And I hope that as long as it took, we wanted to allow many of those who worked with Pravin Gordhan to share their experiences and memories with him, and I hope you don't mind for spending a few more minutes with us. I asked Vanita earlier if she would like to say something, and she said, I'll see how I feels. But before and now, and I actually have it in my own speech, she confirms that the 10 years that Pravin spent at SARS as Commissioner, the time he spent at SARS, but especially the 10 years as Commissioner, were his best years. Not only for him, but for them as a family. And it was so because it brought out his true creativity to make meaningful impact that today we reflect on. And everything that was said about him today, we can vouch for. If you wanted to fact check it, you would find it 100% correct. Because these aren't stories that we heard. These are stories that we lived through. Today, I stand in a space where Pravin Gordhan often stood. A space where he stood proudly, a space from where he led with clarity of purpose and measurable impact, a space from where he touched the lives of so many South Africans. As you saw from the video collage and the many tributes that were shared, Pravin filled many spaces from the front line to the classroom and from the classroom to the boardroom. And he did this with equal ease. In every space, he connected with people. His life mission and purpose was about improving the quality of life for people, and particularly those who could not fend for themselves. As you heard from the speakers this morning, whatever position PG might have occupied, whether as a young student protester, a community organizer, an underground anti-apartheid operative, a negotiator at CODESA, a member of parliament, and ultimately a cabinet minister, it was not the titles that attracted him. He remained a social activist throughout, who fought his life with uncompromising courage and stood fearlessly in the face of opposition. He remained single-mindedly committed to improving conditions for people, especially the most vulnerable. What was remarkable was that PG did not only want a better life for himself, as many who pursue self-interest do. He worked for a better life for all and would not have it for himself if he could not share it with everyone. Unlike many of his critics, who are known for their empty words and hollow rhetoric, Pravin followed through with impactful action and delivered measurable results, and no one can dispute this. Today, we thought we would focus on and celebrate his time and contribution at SARS. Over the last few days, much was spoken about him as a social activist fighting for the liberation of our country, as a politician and public servant. We want to focus on his contribution at SARS, because being the Commissioner provided him with one of the most appropriate opportunities in his life as a social activist to give expression to the purpose of his life. Vani, Anisha, Priyesha, I'm sure you will agree with me, and you have just, that for Pravin and for you as a family, SARS were his best years. We certainly have claimed it as such. Of course, we all have pride in our Constitution. It is often hailed as world-class. We sing as we must our national anthem with gusto and emotion, and we stand tall under the colorful South African flag. But none of these evocative national symbols puts food on the table for the hungry, nor does it provide health care for those who cannot afford it, necessary education for the next generation, and other social services. It does not pay social grants to millions who would be destitute otherwise. PG knew this only too well. He knew that our democratic freedom would mean very little if it could not be funded. His foundational work at SARS, at its establishment, was not about the administration of tax and customs laws to collect taxes, enforce compliance, and facilitate legitimate trade, as much as it was about transforming the lives of South Africans in material ways. The work of SARS then, as it still is today, provide government the financial resources to provide for the well-being of South Africans. And thank you, Dennis, for reminding Momo that we need more money. Pravin's clarity of purpose was matched by sharp intellect and persuasive charm. I had to prepare many days for a 7:30 meeting in his office. It was an all-nighter, and you knew even then you would almost always come second. PG was intolerant of mediocrity and unequivocally committed to excellence and honest hard work. Yet he believed in creating opportunities for younger people. Many of the people here today, and those whom you heard earlier on, are testament to him having connected with them and have created a popcorn stand for them to demonstrate their leadership skills. That was the opportunities Pravin believed he would give to people. I know this because I was there. You should know how he tested me before he officially told me I'm the Chief Operating Officer. He gave me a hard time. When he hired me, he offered me a higher salary than he was earning at the time, because he brought me in from the financial service sector where they spoil you with too much money. But such was the mark of his commitment to build strength across the organization and to enrich the gene pool. He did not subscribe to the lid factor, to borrow from Ken Blanchard in 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. His words to me at the time was, we are just a group of activists, and now we need professional managers that can take the organization further. Barry was later conned into this with the same quip, and he joined. I joined to establish the large business division. It was a while later only that the slow to catch up Minister Manuel agreed to give Pravin a salary increase. After the REM committee twisted his hand. And then Pravin once again earned more than me. We wanted to have this memorial here today because the world have heard so much of Pravin's public life as an activist and a public servant. But the story of Pravin's contribution in laying the foundation of SARS just had to be told. And how best than not from scholars or reporters, but from those who were in the trenches with him, as you've heard today. To speak of PG, to speak of him in the past tense is hard. I will miss those messages and often the secretive venues where you would only find out minutes before you got there. I'll tell you a little story. When he, after that dreadful return to the Treasury, I was in Cape Town and I sent him a text. I said, listen, I know you're busy. It's the day before budget, but you must have a cup of coffee. I'll come and have a coffee with you. I'll come to the Plain Street office. And he said, yes, I'll turn you, and Bless will know. And so that morning I got in my car and I drove as we had arranged to meet. And on the way, Blessing called me and said, Minister asked if you could come a bit later. So I said, okay, how much later? She said, I'll let you know. And so I parked and I had a coffee. And then she called me back again and she said, I'm not supposed to tell you, but Minister has been called to a meeting with the President. So I said, okay, Bless, what must I do? Just wait, he still wants to see you. And so, of course, I waited, and a few minutes later, Bless called again and said, drive to the Vineyard Hotel and wait there until I call you. So I drove to the Vineyard Hotel and I waited there. And then later she called me, she said, go up to the house up in Newlands. The Minister's back home now. So of course when I got there, Vani, I don't know if you remember, I walked there and him and Kabisi Jonas had just returned from the President for a briefing. It was traditional, the Minister of Finance would brief the President on the budget speech. And so when I walked in there, PG was fuming. He was fuming. And I said, what's wrong? He said, you know, and he used some big words in Latin. He said, I was invited to this meeting and I thought I was going to give the president a briefing. But all he was interested in, when I walked in, the communications was there, the cameras was there. All he was interested in was a photo with me to make it appear as if we were in good terms. And that photo was on the business day the following morning. But many such secretive meetings where you were invited to, even later on, when I worked with him in other ways. Today, we serve in this privileged role, recognizing that it was Pravin who conceived the concept of a modern tax and customs administration. It was under his leadership that the foundation was laid and built the initial digital plinth on which we have the privilege to build today. This will be one of his most defining legacies. Enough about him. I'd like to turn to you and share some thoughts, hopefully, to comfort you, dear Vani, Anisha, and Prahisha. Whilst everyone acclaims Pravin as they rightly should, the terrible loss you experience is inexplicable. At this time of sad bereavement, with its fair share of pain, whilst we mourn the passing of a leader, you have to endure the loss of a life partner, a confidant, a dad, and a friend. And I know you never fill those gaps ever again. Death remains one of the most intense pain we experience as bereaved. Even though we live with these inevitable shadows every day, we never become used to it. We experience grief because we see death as being irrevocable. There is no turning back. Yet, the Bhagavad Gita, as do many scriptures, explain that the essence of life, often referred to in the religious texts as the soul, is eternal and does not perish when the body dies. In the Gita, death is described as a mere transition from one physical form to another, and that life, or the soul, it says, will manifest through rebirth. In the Christian Bible, as described by Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, it says, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." As a young pastoral leader, I often reflected on why would those who mourn experience comfort. And to understand this, we must remind ourselves that mourning results from separation we experience when someone we love has died. And what this infers is that those who mourn, as you do now, are comforted in the belief that when we take leave of the mortal remains of a dearly departed one, we will never be separated from the immortal essence of the life that defined the human existence. In this sense, human death is an even greater miracle than birth. According to the laws of physics, we say that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change from one form to another. Our arrogant minds are too small to fully grasp the gift of life. We can comprehend neither its origin nor its destination, because life is infinite, eternal, and extends beyond that which we can experience with our very limited senses, or which we can express even with an English vocabulary of just over 1 million words. The circle of life is most glorious, and what we experience is a mere human perspective of its magnificence. That which was never born can never die. And so while the human form of his life has ended, be comforted that the immortal essence of the life of Pravin lives on. Not only will you cherish the precious memories drawn from the moments you have shared with him, and draw comfort from the knowledge that his time spent with us was not in vain, but importantly, his many selfless sacrifices during his brief season with us, leaves indelible impressions on us. His positive impact on our lives will regenerate and find rebirth through those of us who will continue his legacy. May you find comfort knowing that your husband and dad will live on because of the essence of his purposeful life. And it will continue to be a blessing to you and many of those who were touched by his fearless conviction and selfless service. You will never be separated from the work of his love and the fruits of his labor. May you who mourn his passing be comforted and healed from your pain. Now, finally, a word to all of us who are sad and bereaved, we who are left behind. We still have an opportunity to reflect on our own life. Despite our futile sense of our own invincibility at times, we all will give up our mortal existence. None of us will get out of here alive. Despite this, we must all walk through the inevitable door that Pravin has passed. And when we do, how will our eulogy be read? What will be the story told about the life we've lived? I pray that the good works of Pravin and many others like him will find rebirth in each of us. Each of us, like Pravin, merely passes through this earthly plane in mortal form for a brief moment on the infinite timeline of eternity. Pravin's journey lasted just more than 75 years. Others have significantly fewer years, while some may become centurions. In the words of Madiba, and you stole my words, Anisha, what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is the difference that we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. As a child, in Sunday school, we learnt a poem which I share with you. Life escapes with every breath and quickly passes by. What you have lost, you'll never regain. It's gone as moments fly. So strive towards a worthy goal, a glorious crown to gain. It's not your fault that you were born, but do not live in vain. As we wish Pravin hamba kahle, let's take his final words to heart. There is still much to do. We dare not stop now. Sitkubeka silwa ukulwa uguhle. Keep fighting the good fight. Thank you for the wonderful SARS colleagues, and especially to those who managed this important event. Thank you once again to Family Gordhan. Thank you for all of you for sharing this time of reflection with us and with the family. Nkosi kakhulu, baie dankie.
My part is done. Our next speaker is Mr. Nathaniel Mabetwa. He's an executive in SARS. He's going to thank us all. Thanks, Nat.
Good afternoon, everyone. Commissioner, I don't understand why they asked me to speak after you. You're always a very difficult act to follow. Let me also greet the colleagues that are joining us on different platforms live. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to those that are in the venue. And also good afternoon to the family specifically, and all protocols observed. I am here to do a vote of thanks, and in conversation with some of the organizers, I said to them that I would always like to say a few words as well, just to reflect on PG and the impact that he has had on me. So before I do that, let me just maybe do what I'm supposed to do here, and then I'll do that towards the end. I want to take this time to thank the family. Specifically, let's ask all of us to do a couple of things. And I have not cleared this with my bosses, so I hope I don't get into trouble. But I want to ask all of us to get up on our feet and to give a rousing standing ovation to the family, and also just to thank them for having allowed PG to spend this time with us. Can we all do that? Standing ovation, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Commissioner, I also want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to have this moment to reflect and to share some of the views that we have shared this morning. I want to thank the organizing team as well for the work that they have done. We know that it's really been very difficult for all of us, but they have done a sterling job, so well done to them. Program Director Sobantu, thank you very much to you as well for directing this program exceptionally well. So thank you to you and your team as well. Let me also acknowledge the presence of a PSA General Manager, Mr. Ruben Maleka, who is also here. So thank you for also being here. To all the speakers that have come on to the podium, thank you very much for the messages that you have shared. The colleagues that have come up to speak here, I also want to thank you for representing us so well. Thank you very much to you as well. Former colleagues that came up here, thank you for honoring this occasion and sharing your reflections of PG with us as well. Let me turn to the 11,000 or so employees of SARS and indeed say to you that we have a privilege of standing on the shoulders of this giant. Commissioner mentioned it as well, that we need to take this work to the next level. A lot more has been said by a lot more other colleagues and people that have worked with PG. I think you'll agree with me that he has taught us quite a lot of things. Some of them have come through in terms of what has been shared here with us this morning. Allow me to just capture a few of these. The first one is PG taught us to be selfless. He taught us that we need to be true servant leaders. That comes through in everything that has been said here and in everything that we have experienced working with him. Nene spoke about the story of the expensive hotel room, which also highlights the selfless nature that he has taught us. He taught us to be patriotic, to really love our country. And the governor spoke about how he loved our people and how we should also love our people. PG taught us about the higher purpose. Intikap spoke about his intentions were only to the higher purpose, and that we need to continue to pursue this higher purpose. It was one of the tenets that he continuously spoke to us about. He taught us to be activists. Former Minister Nene spoke about the early days of the filing season and how we went into different areas in the filing season process. And most of us became the activists, and he taught us really to really push the boundaries. Jean spoke about the integrity that he also taught us and how we should carry out that level of integrity. But more importantly, colleagues and friends, PG taught us the importance of taking big bets on other people. He took big bets on most of us. When I joined SARS, I came from SAB. I knew nothing about tax, and yet he took a big bet on me and put me to be one of the deputy receivers in KZN, and later on became receiver of revenue in that branch. He continued to take big bets on all of us. Habiba spoke about how he always had our backs. Nene says he saw us as individuals. So he continued to give us the support that we needed. Prof. Randall speaks about how he took us to different heights that we even never thought we would get to, or we thought they were impossible to reach, because he took big bets on us. He believed in us. Now the question to all of us, colleagues, as we close, is what are we going to do about it? What are the next steps that we're going to carry out? Are you standing here because you want me to finish? I'm finishing. So what are we going to do about it? Les is saying to us, the battle is not over. We need to fight a good fight and finish the race. Judge Davis says, do what you have to do and do more of what you have been doing. So thank you very much to all of you for this time. Thank you to all that have been on the podium here presenting and sharing their thoughts. Let me close off with a statement by Nelson Mandela in a speech that he made in July 2007 when he said, "It is in your hands." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mabetwa. Thank you. I had apologized on behalf of SARS about the time that we've kept our guests here. So that's the reason I'm standing next to you. Apologies. So we will request that you remain seated. Traditionally, that the family will leave first, accompanied by Mandy and the Commissioner, and then the VIP guests together with the Commissioner. We remain seated, and then only when they exit, and then we will depart. Commissioner? Come again? Yeah, I can someone sing, yeah. Ayo matata, yo matata, yo matata, ayo mudimo.
Motima halite. Ayo matata, ayo matata, ayo motima halite. Igama lenkosi malibongwe, 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 malibongwe. Igama lenkosi malibongwe, 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 malibongwe. Igama lenkosi malibongwe, malibongwe, malibongwe. Igama le uJesu pakeme, upakeme, 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 uJesu pakeme, upakeme, 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 uJesu unothando, 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 unothando. uJesu unothando, 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 unothando. Igama lenkosi malibongwe, 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 malibongwe. Igama lenkosi malibongwe, 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 malibongwe. Oh, igama lenkosi.